Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the Joint City Council Committee on Children and Youth and Finance Committee's public hearing on resolution number 210698. Mr. Clerk, could you please open up our session?
Yes, Chair. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make sure these remote hearings are possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com.
Great. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. Clerk, could you please read the title of the resolution?
I believe we need to call the roll, Chair.
Okay, sorry about that. I now note the hour has come, and a quorum of our members is now present. Mr. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Thomas, Brooks, Gautier, Johnson, Quinones Sanchez.
Here.
Oh.
Councilmember O. Councilmember Bass.
Good afternoon. I am present.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember Dom. Councilmember Jones.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I am present.
Councilmember Spiller.
Good afternoon, chairs. I am present.
Co-Chair Green.
Good afternoon, council members and colleagues. I am present.
And Chairperson Yin.
Good afternoon, and I am present. Are there any other council members whose names that we might have omitted? Thank you so much. A quorum of the committee is now present, and this hearing is now called to order. Mr. Clerk, could you please read the title of the resolution?
Yes. Resolution number 210698, authorizing the City Council committees on Children and Youth and Finance to hold joint hearings on a plan to fund a comprehensive remediation and modernization of Philadelphia's public school buildings to address major facilities flaws, adapt to a changing climate, and ensure public school students have the safe and modern school buildings they deserve.
Thank you so much.
Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, consenting to being recorded. Also, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, we will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose.
Thank you so much, Mr. Clerk. Again, this is a public hearing of the Committees on Children and Youth and Finance regarding resolution number 210698. We're going to open, I know my colleague, Councilmember Green and the co-chair of the Finance Committee has some opening remarks, and then I'll follow him with my opening remarks as well. Councilmember Green.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. It's a pleasure to co-chair this hearing regarding schools and the future of schools. I'm also glad that our Education Committee Chair, Councilmember Maria Quinones Sanchez, is also participating, attending, and I want to thank her for her ongoing leadership in this regard. And this is an issue that I think impacts all members of council. Many of us are not only elected officials, but also parents who have children in the school district. I have a son who's still in the school district, and many people know that my mother taught in the district for over 30 years. And over those 3 decades, a lot of things have not changed. We're still dealing with asbestos and mold, which I'm addressing through other legislation, but we really need to have a much more comprehensive perspective on how we move our city forward from an education perspective. The type of facilities that we have for education, I think, impact not just some of the issues that we have with our young people in reference to violence and public safety, but also our ability to attract businesses and grow our city. So this is a multifaceted issue. We have to be creative in the ways that we finance these school buildings, but it's really going to be a partnership in order to really address the issue that we need to address. I don't think we can just rely on the school district of Philadelphia to solve this issue. I think this needs to be a collaborative process with all involved, and also looking to what other cities have done in this space. Over late summer, early fall, I had an opportunity to speak on a panel at a conference and learned what's happening in other cities in Montgomery County, Maryland. I've talked to colleagues both as part of the New Deal and the National League of Cities and Democratic municipal officials, and have seen some of the ways they have been very creative in reference to moving forward and creating new education spaces and new public spaces, both for education and for other uses in their cities. And I think we need to think outside of our box in these issues. I know we do have some challenges in reference to some of the state laws and how those laws impact how we do things as a city, but we need to be more creative. Our buildings are not getting younger. This is not some reverse or Benjamin Buttons type of thing. Many of our school buildings are getting close to 100 years old or shortly thereof. And so we need to really think about how we move forward in a collective, collaborative way in how we address these issues. So I look forward to this conversation and ongoing conversations as we go into the new year and prepare for a new head of our school district so we can work in a way that's going to move in a fashion that's going to really help provide the best educational facilities for the children in the city of Philadelphia. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Co-Chair. I also want to follow your remarks. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us here today. I absolutely want to acknowledge the work of our council colleagues who have been vocal proponents working to address school facility issues in their communities, many for years on end. I also want to especially thank my co-chair today, Councilmember Green, who has been a tremendous partner on the school facilities effort, on an effort to build out a Fund Our Facilities coalition with a number of different entities, including our partners at the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, and pushing for a strong, proactive, and publicly engaged vision for the school district we both need and deserve. We called for this hearing because it's clear that the need to modernize and remediate our city's public schools has never been greater. We're here to jumpstart and focus this conversation on what a comprehensive plan to address Philadelphia's insufficient school facilities looks like, how to have a clear timeline, engage the public, and hear the firsthand experiences of those who walk the halls of our schools each and every day. Councilmember Green said that this issue is more than just one that relates to our specific committees. It's deeply personal. I taught at one of the oldest schools in the city of Philadelphia in the 1990s. I'm a mother who has had a child in a Philadelphia public school every single year since 2002. And what we know is that our students deserve modern, safe, and healthy school buildings that support their learning and development. There's clearly a whole host of research that shows the benefits of schools with spaces such as playgrounds and gardens, temperate classrooms with heating and air conditioning, learning areas such as art rooms and science labs, clean and functioning bathrooms, abundant natural light, and quality acoustics to quiet noise and external distractions. These things are critical to students' learning. They establish a sense of climate. They help us retain teachers and improve our students' physical health and development. Good schools anchor our communities and help our entire city grow. And at the same time, we understand that there are serious risks that these aging buildings pose for our students and staff. And we're going to hear from a number of individuals about the impacts of those types of buildings on our children's learning. Many of our schools are in need of major repair or replacement. 80% of Philadelphia's public schools are over 70 years old. 38 of them, almost 1 in 5, are more than 100 years old. We've got schools without functioning HVAC systems, lead in our paint, bathrooms that flood, roofs that leak, and windows that cannot open. In just the last 2 years alone, 12 public schools have shut down due to toxic elements such as damaged asbestos, flaking lead paint, and mold growth. None of these conditions is new. We all know the urgency, but I think we are here because we are surprised by and sometimes disappointed in the lack of public and clear action, especially when resources are potentially available. 5 years ago, we had the first Parsons Facility Conditions Assessment Report detailing over $5 billion in urgently needed repairs. We should have jump-started a clear facilities master planning process then. But we are now here 6 years later with a second go-around on the Parsons report, which has yet to be made public. I do want to acknowledge the district's recent efforts to increase capital funding, which has reached the highest levels in recent years through use of the American Rescue Plan Act funds and issuance of additional capital bonds in 2019 and this year. However, and I think the district will be one of those to be the first to say this, though this additional spending is an improvement, it is far below what is necessary and needed to engage in the full-scale modernization and remediation to achieve the school system our students truly deserve. So we will need to think creatively and expansively about ways in which to fund this critical work. Second, this conversation has to be about a public process of community engagement. The modern school system our children both need and deserve is far greater than the resources that currently exist and will involve a process that will surely outlast nearly all of us as government or appointed officials. The constant that must continue to drive this process forward is the public. A public that is engaged with the facilities master planning process, a public that is invested in the local funding of that facilities master plan, and a public that will lobby state and federal entities relentlessly because this is about our children's lives. We are long overdue for a clear vision for the future, one that is created with and driven by our school communities, students, parents, teachers, principals, and so many others. We need a vision that emphasizes transparency about timeline, about costs, and plans to address the necessary urgent repairs and remediations while also laying out a detailed plan for major new school construction to systematically modernize every single school across the district. Today, we will hear from a variety of stakeholders, including parents, academics, district officials, advocates, and leaders from other cities, as well as leaders here at home who have advised other cities. We will hear from finance and facilities experts, all of whom can shed light on the process and timeline, as well as the impact of action and inaction, both on planning and in public engagement. This is the first of many conversations, and I look forward to having it get underway. I want to acknowledge the presence of our colleague and fellow parent, Kendra Brooks, Councilmember Kendra Brooks. Thank you so much for joining us today. I also want to ask if any other council members would like to make any additional opening remarks. Seeing none, will the clerk please call the first witness or the first panel of witnesses?
Yes, for the first panel, we have Board President Joyce Wilkerson. Also available for comment are Reggie McNeil, Ori Monson, and Alicia Prince.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I wanted to make sure that everyone is connected and ready to proceed. And if you are, Chair Wilkerson, if you could please state your name for the record, and then you may proceed with your testimony. We're just checking to make sure that Chair Wilkerson is connected, and if need be, to unmute. Do we have other representatives? I know I saw Chair Wilkerson on a little bit earlier. Do we have other representatives from the School District of Philadelphia who are currently present and available?
Good afternoon, Councilwoman Ginn. We're working to get President Wilkerson on. Can we just get 1 minute? I think she's
Of course,
having
no problem.
a connection issue. Joyce is having board president is having an issue unmuting. I'm not sure if someone can support her with that.
Council support has contacted me and recommends that she log out and then log back into the meeting.
Okay.
Madam Chair, and I know
Yes.
we will probably ask this question of people to testify, but one question that I would want to know, is there a cost benefit analysis done on those schools you mentioned that were 100 years old versus us going out and finding space, whether it's privately owned or other space that we can adapt for school use, and how that weighs out by way of cost benefit analysis?
Duly noted. I want to just note that Councilman, we will come to your question, I think, was just very important. But it looks like we're joined by Board President Joyce Wilkerson. Welcome, Board President Wilkerson. I'm glad that we were able to get you on, and thank you for making yourself available.
Thank you so much for the invitation to present to Council. Before I launch into my prepared comments, I want to say how gratified I am by the opening remarks and the commitment from Council members to work collaboratively on this issue, think out of the box, and address not just school facilities in isolation, but the needs to plan in a more holistic way for neighborhoods in Philadelphia. A theme that has been going on for years is the collaboration and the use of facilities, having school facilities down the street from rec facilities. So I think hopefully this will launch a new process. I know there's been talk about a task force convening that could really focus in a sustained way on some of these issues, because I agree that the time has come that we can't have inaction any longer. And with that preliminary comment, Good afternoon, members of council, and thank you for the opportunity to testify in front of you today to share information about the district's work to create welcoming and supportive school environments for every child. My name is Joyce Wilkerson, and I am the president of the Board of Education. As the governing body of the district, our role is to set a vision for public education in Philadelphia and then hold the district accountable for meeting this vision. We believe in a school system that provides every student with tools and experiences they need to reach their fullest potential. And in order to achieve this vision, we've adopted a 5-year strategic plan called Goals and Guardrails, which clearly outlines our priorities and the non-negotiable conditions needed in schools to make our vision a reality. Our goals focus on student academic achievement. Student learning is and must be our priority. Our first guardrail is focused on building welcoming and supportive schools with clean, safe environments and inclusive climates with structures in place to provide our students access to social, emotional, and mental health supports that are necessary for their academic success. We established Guardrail 1, as we know and understand, that school learning does not happen in a vacuum, and students can only thrive in environments built to support their academic achievement. However, it's important that we not focus singularly on the facilities challenges we face as a district. We must develop a robust and comprehensive process that identifies the educational programs we need for our students and school communities. Public school facilities must be designed to support the educational programs that are identified. The board has approved a capital budget and capital improvement plan that allows the district to address both immediate needs of our school facilities and begin to focus on building learning environments that can reimagine spaces around educational programs that support student learning. This past October, the district was able to borrow $375 million in capital dollars to enhance this work. The approved capital plan is focused on dramatically expanding facility improvements to provide safe, healthy, and modernized schools over the next 4 years. Coupled with the capital borrowing of $500 million in 2019, this investment represents the beginning of a recovery from decades of deferred maintenance of district facilities caused by inadequate, inequitable, and unpredictable funding, which is the subject of fair funding trial taking place in the Commonwealth Court. Further, the board also supports the district's commitment to utilizing alternative arrangements or structures to allow the district to spend funds responsibly and effectively in a timely manner. Over the past 6 months, the district has been working with bond counsel and others to explore alternative structures to more efficiently address district's capital needs. This could include using an authority or entering into intergovernmental agreements or the expanded use of turnkey structures. These strategies allow the district to use funds more effectively and, no less importantly, enable the district to focus on its primary responsibility, the education of our children. As I said, every child deserves a safe and nurturing school community where they're valued, respected, and encouraged. To do this well, we know we must engage in a robust and comprehensive community engagement process to create a vision for 21st century learning environments in Philadelphia that support the needs of all children. The vision for a 21st century learning environment must first be defined by the educational needs of our students and their school communities, and then focused on designing buildings that support those educational needs. The board supports the district's commitment to a robust engagement process. Finally, we must work together in partnership to make this vision a reality for all children in Philadelphia. We need your support and that of our state and federal legislators to make a firm commitment to advocating for funding we need to see that our most vulnerable children have educational programs and school facilities in which our children can feel valued and know that their community supports them and their educational goals. On behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your continued partnership and support for our schools, and thank you for the opportunity to provide with updates on this important work. As you mentioned, I'm joined here today by Alicia Prince, who is Chief of Staff to Superintendent Height, and also Reggie McNeil, who is our Chief Operating Officer and so oversees the capital work in the district. And we are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Board President Wilkerson. I'll start off with a few questions, and I know my colleagues have a number of questions as well. At the November 9th biannual meeting, you had stated that the board had not yet received the updated Parsons FCA reports, and that you are these facilities condition assessment reports, and that you were awaiting a report from the district and an opportunity to review those materials. Have you since received reports from the district regarding the updated FCAs, or have had opportunities to review materials related to the updated FCAs?
Yeah, the district has provided, right about a week or two after we met with council and the administration, the district got access to, I don't know if it's the final Parsons report, but a Parsons report that is updated from the one that was released in 2017. And those are being used to help develop the capital plan, the capital budget that the district will be employing as it works to build out this work. So yes, the answer is yes, we've received that.
When will the updated FCA reports be made publicly available?
Let me pivot to Alicia Prince. She has more detailed information about that.
Good afternoon, Ms. Prince. If you could just state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Alicia Prince, Chief of Staff to Superintendent Height. As related to the Parsons report, at this time we have, as Board President Wilkerson has shared, we have shared that information over. We contracted with Parsons in 2020 for a follow-up study to inform our internal strategy to develop capital budgets and capital projects. Right now, this information is internal for planning purposes to be used in conjunction with a broader and more robust community engagement process, as President Wilkerson spoke about. So we will be launching a larger community engagement process, and that's when that information will be shared.
And I think it would help to have a little bit more of a higher level understanding about the findings from the report, as well as some sense of the major changes or any kind of surprises in the context of the 2017 update. So for example, in 2017, the Parsons team identified almost 12,000 deficiencies that had a repair cost of approximately $4.5 billion, with the estimate of total needs coming close to almost $8 billion. And that would have covered the time period of 2018 to 2027. Have any initial projections of updates on those figures been shared with you? And if so, what are they?
No, I don't. We haven't gotten that. I think one of the challenges we're working with is how you frame this conversation appropriately. Let me take a long run at this. When we look at what we have going on in Philadelphia, we have any number of facilities that are very different in terms of the quality of the education we can provide our students. The district recently completed work on Propel School that enrolls about 1,200 students. And one of the things we've learned is that when you have a student population, a sufficient student population, you can have much more robust programming for students. It's that kind of learning that has led us to take a step back to rethink how it is that we're approaching what has essentially been characterized as a facilities conversation. And so when we look at it, we're beginning to ask, what kind of education do we want for our children? What kind of programming do we want for our children? And then what kind of facilities do we need to support that? We currently have high schools with 200 students, 300 students. We have schools at every level that has a small percentage of the enrollment they need for the district to be able to roster to begin to provide the kind of programming that families ask for. When we go out into communities, people are asking about things like, what kind of programming? Are there music lessons? Are there clubs? And those those issues need to be a primary component of what we think about, and then attach the buildings to that kind of programming. So when you ask about what's the cost, the question is the cost to support the kind of programming that we want. And so, I have not seen that figure. The board has not been provided with that figure.
So I want to be acknowledging that, the sort of conversation about the kinds of schools our children need have been going on for 20 years. I certainly know it was the initial conversation that happened when we were first taken over by the state back in 2000. And I just want us to be thoughtful that I understand that this will continue to be an ongoing conversation. The types of schools that our children need is a constant. I think what we're trying to drill down on is not to get so lost in that conversation that we don't embark on a clear and hard plan and have some cognizance about numbers, timelines, and the kind of partnerships that are absolutely necessary to that. So you're saying that there's no cost estimate to the updated FCA reports that you have currently seen?
No, I haven't seen it, but I want to make clear also that the district is not doing nothing. And so, the board has approved a capital plan. There's construction underway. The district is looking at, novel approaches to how we do that work so we can do it more efficiently than in the past. But you can't ignore the rest of the conversation that has to happen. We're also cautioned that that it does not make sense to invest money in facilities that we may not want to keep online for the long term. So I think we have to do both. We have to both tackle some of the short-term needs, medium-term needs, as we try to figure out what the long-term strategy is going to be.
I understand.
I'll pivot to Ms. Prince and Mr. McNeil. They may have dollar figures that you're asking for.
Okay. Why don't I'll hear from them, and then I have a little bit of a follow-up around that.
Yes, I think Board President Wilkerson said it correctly. Again, when we did the study this year, this was to inform an internal strategy. So the goal was not to come up with numbers directly in that way, because we wanted to do more of a robust community engagement process as part of this. So that is a critical part of it. We were looking for an assessment to be done to understand our conditions, and we didn't want things that just were putting a dollar figure on it, but rather understanding what those conditions were to come up with a larger and more robust process and plan.
Sorry. Okay. So I think one of the questions is that, we spend capital spending every year. It's just something the district does every single year. The proposed capital budget for FY22 was $422 million, which is a significant increase from the previous year and some other recent years. But the point is, my question isn't about a hold steady point and whether the district does capital spending. The conversation today is about a larger plan that goes forward. And part of the understanding is, are we at even a level of annual investment now where the total cost of deficiencies is not increasing? Or are we in a situation where our overall repair costs continue to, outpace what money we're putting in, and so we're falling further and further behind every year? Like, we can't answer that question unless you have a sense of where the needs are.
Ms. Prince, I'll defer to you and Mr. McNeil.
So in response to that, I would say that, as you know, the reason we did the original assessment was so that we can continue to address work. And as Board President Wilkerson said, we've been conducting work on our buildings. That is something we continue to do: daily maintenance, upkeep of systems, investing in HVAC, investing in ventilation. We have GISA projects that we've been doing. So that work has been continuing to happen and has been taken into account with the new Parsons assessments that have been done around the building facility assessments as well as educational suitability of those assessments. So work that has been done has been assessed and is a part of what we ask Parsons to do as we were able to gather data in order for us to, again, engage in a larger process for a larger facilities plan.
I mean, one of the biggest, issues that we constantly hear from the public is transparency. People don't know what repairs we are doing, what the timeline for these repairs are, how it's being prioritized amongst different competing needs, where schools are in the lineup in terms of getting things done. And so, this is partly why we're talking about the importance of the clarity about these updated reports, how they're being understood, and why it feels difficult when the district doesn't make those reports public, nor does it have a sense of whether our investment costs are meeting the needs of what the updated reports are saying. Again, I appreciate the uptick in the work, and acknowledge that the district has done more than has been before. But, the district, what we're asking from the district is whether we are spending enough to stop the expansion of the deficiencies and the facilities deficits that seem to be accumulating and piling up, or is our spending still insufficient to even hold steady? Can you answer that question?
So overall costs will always continue to increase until we have a more long-term sustained funding for our facilities work. And I think that's one of the things that you emphasize, and we truly appreciate your advocacy for that. I do think until we have long-term sustained funding for our facilities, that this will be something that will always increase in what is necessary. I do want to just clarify, though, that the capital plan is detailed and approved at a public meeting, and then that is a public document, and that details the process and the work that is done and approved over each time frame of that capital plan. So I do want to make sure that is noted.
Understood, but I don't know that any school community, including school principals, is familiar enough, even if the capital plan may be online. We've even looked at it, and we have no clue whether Robeson High School is getting its urgent facilities needs repaired. Whether other schools, whether Ethel Allen is ever going to get a new set of bathrooms, to be addressed within their building. So I find it hard to believe that anybody thinks that the capital plan, despite it being online, is actually a publicly accessible document, nor is it clear enough to do that. So I think one of the things, and I do appreciate your being clear about, but do you have a number for the amount of annual investment that's needed to stop the expansion of the facilities deficiencies? So you said that, in part, you need steady spending, you need more spending, but do you have a sense of what that annual investment would be needed in order to ensure that we're not falling further behind?
Yeah, so I don't really think that. Good afternoon, and I hope I can be heard.
Yes.
I came off of mute. I've tried a couple of times. I can't really say that.
Excuse me, Mr. Could you just state your name for the record, and then you can proceed? Thank you so much.
My name is Reggie McNeil. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the School District of Philadelphia, and thank you for this forum and having the ability to share out some of the things that we're doing as it relates to our facility. So the question that you asked was about how much, do we have any idea on how much of a need that we have to try to reduce the amount of deficiencies within our school district's buildings. So we use the facility condition assessment to give us a snapshot in time of where we are with our deferred maintenance and the funding needs that we have for towards those facilities. And then within the FCA, if you look at it from 2017, it also speaks to if we do not have a response for a facility in that given year, how by not replacing that system, how it's going to continue to have a more of an increase in cost for replacement as time moves on. So I heard you say that earlier, and you're absolutely right. if we don't address these needs with the additional funding that we all know that we need, then we're going to continue to have a rate of costs that's increasing, and it's going to outpace what we're doing as far as our spending. But the other point I wanted to make about spending is not just so much about the spending, the additional funding. We also need the capacity to address the facilities conditions improvements that we need to make. And so, as President Wilkerson was saying earlier, we're looking at targeted opportunities for other vehicles that we can use in order to expedite the work. So it's not so much just about the funding, it's also about looking at our strategies that we would use in order to get the work done at a faster rate than which we are right now. And until we can increase that rate, then we are going to continue to battle against the conditions further declining and then adding additional costs to make the repair.
And again, do we have a number on what that amount of investment is?
We do not have a number right now. So what we do have, and you asked about the Parsons study before, and I was trying to get in there then. The Parsons, as part of the 2017 report that came out, they were required to come back and do another assessment based on the capital improvements that we made between that time and now. And they are in the process of doing that. And we expect the end result to be another dollar figure that tells us exactly where we are with our facility, but we did not receive that information yet.
And when do you expect to have that information?
This is supposed to come after the first quarter, after January, after the new year.
I wanted to I know that Ms. Prince had talked about an engagement process, so I may have missed this, but Ms. Prince, could you speak to when the engagement process will actually happen and what will it actually involve? What can the public expect to see?
The public can expect to see an engagement process that is detailed and that involves them through the process to get to a final plan. Right now, the process is being reviewed with the board, and so once that is reviewed, it will be shared out as to what that plan will be. I can say that it will involve community at various levels, including at the facilitator phase, and be very data-driven and interactive.
I think that while I understand the goals of the public engagement process, do you expect to have town halls? Do you expect to do school by school? Do you expect it to be general and regional? Could you give a little bit more detail about that?
It will be all of those things and more.
Okay, I just wanted to acknowledge the presence of Councilmember Gautier and just thank you so much for being here, Councilmember Gautier. And I wanted to open it up to other members on the committee to see if there are any questions from committee members.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Thank you,
Councilmember
Jones.
I would like to repeat, which was asked earlier, has there been a cost benefit analysis to look at aging schools, 100-year-old schools, to say, is it better to look at privately held properties to replace those schools, or to do new construction like they're doing? Thank you very much, for Cassidy Elementary in West Philly. Is that kind of thought out process as to which is more beneficial been done?
Councilman Jones, I'll let COO McNeil. Go ahead, Mr. McNeil.
So yes, I would say that we have done the cost analysis, but it wasn't for privately owned buildings. It was more for, we did what we call a facility condition index, and it's a part of the facility condition assessment, to where you look at the cost of the building to repair it versus the actual value of the building. And depending on the FCI score, that's the driver behind doing a major renovation or building a school brand new.
Okay, so could that be elaborated on to include nearby privately held structures that that might be utilized? Um, in schools where we have small populations, that's probably more possible than if we have 500 and greater populations, because with that size comes other kind of considerations. But I think it might be worth it to just take a look at if you have Gompers, and I'm not picking on Gompers, please, anybody. No, I love Gompers, it's fine. But if there's Gompers and then there's a St. Joe's dormitory that's right near there, or facility right near there that might be parted with, is those kinds of decisions, whether it's LaSalle, whether it's Temple, whether it's Drexel. In the case of SLA, we were able to take a look at a Drexel facility to temporarily house students that were going through that extensive renovation at the Beaver SLA. So that kind of analysis might come in handy both for temporary lodgings while people are repairing things, but also long term. We may say that it just doesn't make sense to build a new building when we can do this cost effectively at an existing structure.
Absolutely. I think through our partnerships with the city and other partnerships that we have out there, we definitely can look and see what the available properties are. The school district has a brokerage firm that does that and more for us, and looking at real estate and also to sell of some of our properties. But I think the first step for us is to take a look at our current inventory, because as you know, a lot of our schools are underpopulated, underutilized, and then we want to first look in-house to see what we can do in order to build a more robust and increase our utilization numbers within our schools after we repair them. That's the first step that we would like to take. But in a situation where that option is something that is not on the table, then I do believe that what you stated about looking at other available properties would be something that we should be interested in pursuing.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. The chair recognizes Council Member Mark Squilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as we go through this process, and obviously the facilities is such a major issue and concern, and knowing that a lot of the time is dedicated toward education and how education will be, worked out through the board and the district. Would it be better just to have certain people concentrating just on the facilities part, Reggie? And I know you're involved in that part of it, and not so much time from the superintendent and others that are really geared toward the education part of this. And is it possible to be able to get a committee together to just do just that and have outside help while we do that?
Councilman Squilla, I'm glad you said that. That is actually directly aligned with what we have already started to do. We again believe that our robust partnerships from those who are specialists are critical through this process. Additionally, we do have an office dedicated strictly to this process, who it's not them being pulled in other directions. Their work is strictly related to school and facilities planning and this work, and that includes educational programming, which, as Board President Wilkerson emphasized, is really critical to this process as well.
I want to chime in there. I think that it's an enormous frustration for all of us that we end up spending so much time focused on facilities. It's important, but I think we all agree that it would serve the children, if we had more specialists focusing on facilities. And we've taken a look at what's going on in Washington, the way they address facilities. I know Mr. McNeil has looked at other districts as well. I think other districts have been at the point where we are now, where the whole focus on education gets sidetracked because we've got these huge facilities challenges. And so we're very much interested in looking at alternative delivery systems so that the facilities can get the kind of focus they need and the district can focus more fully on the academic program. Ms. Prince, you want to give more detail to that?
Sure. I can just add some insight. So we have, just as part of us looking for a larger process around this, we've engaged with specialists throughout the city, as well as who include urban planners, architects, folks who are directly specializing in community engagement, groups that have done this work in other jurisdictions similar to the district across this country, to discuss with how we develop a process to really discuss facilities and the larger work around 21st century facilities, which is really the programming that goes in the facilities, the use of the facilities in a bigger picture, and how they become, I would call them community hubs in a sense, to really make sure that we are engaging in that process with those folks and looking at what is critically important too through this process is the data that drives enrollment, right? And that's looking at data, not just census data, but really where are people, the neighborhoods they're moving into, the communities they're moving into, the demographic of those individuals, what they're looking for, why they're, why you're seeing certain communities in the robust level. So we've spent a lot of time really doing a data, I would call this a really deep data gathering and engagement around this to create that a large plan around this.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. And obviously, I know we have a lot of challenges in all different fronts, and if we could really have people emphasize on the different challenges, I think it may help us be able to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Squilla. The chair recognizes Councilmember Maria Quinones Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also want to acknowledge some of the work the school district has done and just thank them. I know that this summer, having the access to 100 schools and neighborhoods made a big difference. And I know part of this bigger picture planning is how do these schools really become hubs for the neighborhoods that we need. But I really wanted to quickly ask Reggie if he could speak to, the chairwoman was asking about some of this deferred maintenance. Can you speak to what are the new protocols when work orders go in, how they are addressed very quickly? Because I think that's how we build trust, right? That's how we build trust with our community stakeholders, that we're taking, those complaints as they come in seriously and addressing them. Can you speak to what new systems you have in place and what's the time frame for those turnarounds?
So I don't have there's no specific time frame for all of the work orders as they're categorized by their priority. Our priority ones, of course, we respond to those very rapidly. But one thing that we can't ever lose sight of is all the work orders do not have the same response time. We can go and address the situation, but sometimes we have a wait because we are waiting on materials to be delivered before we actually complete a work order. So I can't tell you that a work order will be done in 24 hours. I can't tell you it's going to be done in a week. I can tell you that it will be acknowledged and then it will be addressed once we have all of the materials in place to actually go after the work order. The new protocols, we are looking at a work order management system right now. We're looking at the one that we use right now, and we've been assessing it for any deficiencies on what we would like to see when it comes to the management and reporting out of our work orders. But in the interim, before we go any further and try to do a deeper dive into a response for that work order management system, things that we have done in-house with our facilities team is we created a facilities management plan. That facilities management plan is an accountability tool for all of our facilities support team members inside of school buildings in partnership with the school leaders. So every week we have our building engineer staff walking a building with the principal or their designee to identify deficiencies and also record any work orders. And then we have our facility area managers, they used to be called facility area coordinators, that meet with that principal staff at least once a month, but it could be more than that. And then they walk through all of the work orders that were generated based on the walkthrough that were performed between the school leader and also the facility support staff. what we've seen that because there's more engagement now, and because both the facility support team and the school leader have identified a common issue within the school, and then there's follow through with the facilities area manager, we're starting to see more attention being paid and more planning being done for that school's work order backlog. So that's what we've done here recently to try and make sure that we are keenly aware of some of the issues that are going on in our schools and how we're addressing them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we have a lot of folks testifying, so I'll be, I don't want to keep taking up any more time. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Councilmember Sanchez. So I think, continuing on with a few more questions, we want to understand a little bit about the district's internal capacity to address some of the questions that have been raised. So how has the district strengthened and expanded its internal capacity to oversee maintenance and new construction work in recent years? And how have you been looking at, beyond the additional funding that you've talked about for capital projects, what growth is needed in terms of the district's internal capacity to manage like a major accelerated system-wide school modernization effort?
So that will go back to what we spoke of earlier as far as some of the tools or the vehicles that we would use to try and expedite the work. A lot of that is having conversations with agencies external to our own to gain that additional support as far as contractors, or something similar to what President Wilkerson mentioned earlier when we did a turnkey project, when we had an agreement with a developer to build the Northeast Community Propel Academy and then turn that building back over to us. That freed up capacity from the staff that we have internal to SDP. So it's looking for vehicles such as those to help expedite the work that is much needed. And if you look at it from a maintenance perspective, what we are challenged with right now, and that what you're bringing to the forefront, is the school funding that we need. We need school funding to address a lot of the staff shortages that we have, specifically in our facilities and maintenance organization. So if we were able to have the funding, we would ever have the staff that we need in order to address some of these work orders that Councilwoman Sanchez has spoke of earlier at a more rapid rate.
I also want to back up a little bit. The district has learned a lot of lessons after SLA Ben Franklin. After SLA Ben Franklin, which happened about the same time that the district, because of improvements in its financial situation, had the opportunity to borrow more funds than it had the ability to access in decades. We understood that we could not handle it in-house alone. And so Mr. McNeil works with outside parties to help oversee the construction work. And you may want to go into more details about the organization that helps project manage for the district to expand our capacity and to make sure that we never have the same kind of problems that we had at SLA Ben Franklin. And Councilwoman, as you know, the board adopted new policies, new procedures to make sure that as we do the work, we do it with a really laser focus on making sure that the students and other employees in the buildings are safe. So we've had a lot that's changed since SLA Ben Franklin that both increases our capacity and also makes sure that we do the work properly. But I think you and I know there are others who are focusing in on using outside parties in a much more aggressive way than we have been. That if we're going to really scale up and tackle this more aggressively, I think, I know from the district side, we're interested in really looking at how it can be done more effectively, drawing on those with the expertise that go beyond what it is that the school district has. The other thing is we've got state laws that make it difficult for us to do work efficiently. So we have four-part bidding, so the district not only is looking at increasing the capacity, but also tackling some of those roadblocks that make school construction more difficult than it ought to be. And so we're trying to, we're trying to prepare ourselves to gear up to be more aggressive. And there are a lot of moving parts to that.
Mr. McNeil, I think per what Board President Wilkerson was saying, the district has contracted with a group to provide large-scale project management support. Is that correct? So could you speak to that contract and what work that group has actually supported?
Absolutely. So they came in after Ben Franklin and finished up the bringing that project into completion, and the group has a contract with us to take on mostly the new construction and major expansion work that we have going on in the district. They're responsible for the project management of the Solace Cohen building that just opened up. They're going to oversee the site construction for Pierce, TM Pierce, that we've just done a groundbreaking on not less than just a week ago or so. They're also they're doing the Ethan Allen, they're doing Richmond, some of our large scale projects, such as what we've experienced over at Ben Franklin. They have the capacity in-house and the controls and structure to deal with the types of complexities that you will encounter when you're dealing with these types of projects.
As we kind of wrap up this conversation about capacity, is it possible for you to send over the organizational charts with names from your office? It's basically the folks who are under the COO, so that we have a better understanding. That would be like the Office of Capital Projects, Environmental Facilities, Maintenance, etc. Are you able to send over the org charts for that?
Councilwoman Gim, we will send over org charts with the positions that are underneath the operating officer's jurisdiction.
Okay.
I just want to say one thing. That's 3,223 positions.
I understand that. I think what we want is to understand who's in charge of those different ones. I don't think we need every single position detailed. But, we also want a sense of whether those positions are actually filled and not just whether they exist in the budget. So it'd help to know what's actually been filled. And then secondly, just to follow up a little bit on the large-scale project management, could you just identify the group? And is that contract going to continue? Is it meant to build out our capacity? Or is it meant just to kind of outsource that work? How are you thinking about how this evolves?
I'm sorry, Alicia, were you responding to that? Or you?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. So the group that we have brought in is literally meant to, again, build out our capacity as part of this work. And also, again, as Board President Wilkerson talked about, as I spoke about earlier as well, we are looking for new ways to continue to do this work, to expand the work. I think we all have the same interest in mind to really address our facilities and the needs, to address our maintenance needs. And so that's why we brought the group in. I am, at this time, just going to refrain from saying their name publicly because, again, I don't know if that's something that just because of contract matters that if we can say publicly at this point. I just want to confirm. But
they take public money from you, aren't they approved?
They are.
Yeah, this is the Mr. McNeil. Can you talk about or identify the company that does the the big project management for us?
Yes, they're called JMT. JM as in Mike T. Tango.
Thank you. Thank you so much, President Wilkerson. I appreciate that.
I think there was just confusion about which outside party we were referring to, and I know that we've had that contract. It was approved by the board. They're identified in almost every.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure. I mean, effectively, what I think is being stated here is that no matter how much we outsource to another entity, we're still going to, given the amount of work that needs to go on in the district and the amount of money that the district is investing, we still need an internal process to robustly oversee contractors, even if the large scale stuff is going external. So that's partly why, we're asking about the organizational charts, names I think are appropriate in that area, and then understanding whether these positions are actually filled, and how to be supportive of the district. Fundamentally, we're looking to be supportive of the district in a modernization effort, but we need a partnership that shows that there's a public process and that we're, council's part of it, because fundamentally the district cannot raise its own revenues. It's going to have to rely on a partnership with the city, with its parents, who are going to be its largest advocates, as well as with the state and federal entities.
That's why I think that, I know that there's been proposed a task force, and that's one way of getting everybody on the same page. That if we're looking at doing an outside authority, different jurisdictions handle it differently. The cutoff point between what's a major project and what's day-to-day maintenance varies, and it's the kind of thing that that we need to think about to figure out how we're going to move forward more aggressively, expanding the district's capacity. So I look forward to having other people at the table, trying to get on the same page with these issues, taking a look at how it's done in other jurisdictions, where it works well, where it hasn't, so that we can get beyond the point where we are now, having hearings and not making the kind of progress I think we all want to have. So we welcome this conversation and look forward to, having partners.
Yes. And, part of this is that, there's some elements of this where, again, just underscoring the amount of money and the amount of willpower to see a project, to see a full-scale modernization of the district through is, again, going to be greater than what we currently have. And it's going to outlast every single one of us who is on this call today. It is going to be a long-term effort for the district. And again, the constant here is not us. It's not a task force. It's actually that public engagement process that we've been really pushing on. And so in order to have part of that public engagement process, clarity about the public engagement process, timelines and public engagement are critically important. Those are things that are within the district's control right now. They don't have to wait for a task force. They don't have to wait for money to come through. They're everyday work that can be done in partnership with all of us, and we can continue to build out our capacity to do more and more together. I think that's a little bit about why you're hearing some frustration from some of us, because we're still struggling to get basic information. We're still struggling to get a sense of timelines, and understanding the district's internal capacity to deal with it, so that we can help be a partner in building that out. Not to, we're not going to get to that next phase right away. We're not in at 10 years down the road. We're here now. And I think part of what you're going to hear from some of our stakeholders is that they need a better and clearer partnership, and especially an engagement process with the district around this. I don't think we've had clarity on that yet.
Just, I think we're all committed to having an engagement process. You'll recall CSPR, where the district made a commitment to have a public process. It didn't go as we wanted, so I think it's worthwhile to spend the time defining a process that can move, that moves and meets the expectations of all parties. And so we're fully committed to having an engagement process, so that we can move forward in a collaborative way with the public understanding, where, what it is that we're looking at, what ideas come out of the public engagement process. We value that as well and understand how important that is. So, we're working towards actually moving forward with that, but are determined to address the things that have been challenges for us before, that prevented the process from concluding in a successful way.
Right. Yeah, I think all of us, if we don't want to repeat it, part of what we don't want to do is, again, be private. We want to engage publicly around it. The last thing I'll say is that I just, want to caution the district, because I know it's been brought up a couple of times, is, you know, it is, there's a lot of temptation to talk about closing schools. And we did close dozens of schools in the early 2010s. And we never built out a process for capacity. It did not strengthen our capacity. It didn't clarify things for us. It was just a disinvestment. And so, again, encouraging the district that you need an investment-oriented approach towards modernization, a public engagement around that process. But if the process begins with school closures and alleged right sizing, you are going to see justified pushback, because we did it already. And we are here more than a decade later without a clear plan on where to go. All we did was just close down 30 public schools and did not leave with a clear plan on what the future could look like. Finally, I just want to say, we have to show the public what we can offer them, why this is a school system worth investing in. And one of the things we never did during the school closings process was we simply close schools and put children into schools that were equally underfunded, as unsupported, and as dysfunctional as the ones that they left. And there's no way that we're going to go through that again. That, in fact, what we have to show is that if people want to see a better school system, they need to know that the schools that they're going to be sending their children, or that the schools that the children themselves are attending, are better than the ones that they had attended before, and that this is a desire to see improvement across the board and not simply a disinvestment, a reduction of the system, a quote-unquote right sizing, when this system has never been appropriately supported, funded, and we're in fact driving people away. So, this is a critically important thing about making sure we don't take assets out of neighborhoods and then find ourselves a decade later with growing neighborhoods now in demand of new school buildings, modern school buildings, and a future that the city can really see as its own. Laying down roots, having families anchored here is truly the path to sustainability, not just for the school district of Philadelphia, but for the city.
We agree with you, and I think that's why how we frame this, so that it can't just be a facilities decision. It can't just be a right sizing decision. We've got to ask more. We have to ask different kinds of questions that go to the things you're talking about. What kind of education would make somebody stay, in a neighborhood? What kind of programming are they looking for? That has to be where those have to be the first questions we ask. But I think we're on the same page. Nobody wants to go back to what happened in the past. I think that the conditions are completely different now. Because of state control, it was impossible for the city to support the district, and so the district started selling off buildings simply because it was going to generate revenue. Because of the hard work that the district's done, we're in a different position now. We're in a position to be able to borrow money. We're in a position to be able to plan long term. So I just, I look forward to working collaboratively, because I think this is a new opportunity for us, and we've got to make sure that we capitalize on it and make the most of it.
If I could, President Wilkerson, I think the biggest deficit that we have right now is one around the public trust. And that's the challenge here, because the money that needs to be raised and the public will to get the schools moving forward is really the thing that needs to happen here for us to really change the nature of the game. And I will also say that having lived through that time period, what I recall was not just that we were out of kind of like not in control of the situation, but that we did not have a firm vision for where we wanted to go. And that's partly why the public nature of a facilities master plan, the timing of a facilities master plan, and public engagement and embracing of that plan is the most critical thing that we have. But I've been very clear that, I think that our deficit is for any struggling public institution does not first start with resources and money. It actually starts with a deficit of public trust. So the more that we can build that bridge together, and we want to be partners with you on it, but we do need to have more information than what we've gotten. And I hope that this, conversation can kickstart and jumpstart more robust support and partnership with one another than maybe what's happened so far. I want to thank this first panel. I want to thank Board President Wilkerson, COO Reggie McNeil, and others from the School District of Philadelphia. Ms. Prince, thank you very much for being on here. Are there any further questions from members of the committees? Seeing none, thank you very much. And will the clerk please call the next panel?
For the next panel, we have Sarah Kloss, Rhea Powell, Dr. Akira Drake Rodriguez, and Donna Cooper.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience and for joining us today. If you could please state your name for the record in the order in which the clerk read your name, you may proceed with your testimony.
Okay, thank you for having me here today. You can hear me, right? Okay, I'm Sarah Kloss. I'm a parent of a second grader at Coppin Elementary, formerly Jackson Elementary, and also have two future students, one of which is sitting on my lap. I am an HSA officer and former SAC member. I have to admit that I always feel a bit conflicted speaking at meetings like this because I am coming from a place of privilege, and it often feels like we are all playing the Hunger Games to have a school building that meets the bare minimum for the health and well-being of students and staff. My biggest takeaway over the years is that a little transparency goes a long way. 3 years ago, I testified to the Board of Education Facilities Committee about custodial staffing shortages and the poor condition of our roof. If we really want to keep our buildings in quality shape, we need the staff to do it. Facilities and the staff to maintain them cannot be uncoupled. In this testimony, I noted that the 2015 facilities report said that our roof was beginning to fail and beyond repair, but yet wasn't on the 5-year plan to be replaced. At the time, the roof was actively leaking and causing mold issues. 2 years after my testimony and 5 years after it was declared failing, we got a new roof in 2020. I want to acknowledge that I am again disheartened to have to wonder if prioritization is being based on who publicly complains the most. Ventilation is another key facilities issue. For COVID reopening, the old mechanical whole building fan that was off for years in our school was finally turned back on. For years, there was essentially no mechanical ventilation going on in the building. As an environmental engineer, light bulbs went off in my head about all the people in our community who complained that the building was exacerbating their breathing issues. After reading multiple air exchange reports, it is clear that many other schools still lack this bare minimum air exchange. Another aspect of our building that needs modernization is the electricity. With the add-ons of 20-plus Chromebooks per classroom and the district-supplied air purifiers, we started losing power in the building on a regular basis in the beginning of the year. The only true solution to this is yet another costly electrical upgrade, and again, it's unclear when that will happen. When I think of modernization, in addition to addressing these deferred maintenance issues, I also think about the overcrowding that is going on in our pocket of South Philly. Again, after much complaining in 2019, the school district developed the Comprehensive School Planning Review, CSPR, and began evaluating our neighborhood to come up with ways to tackle this issue. I was a parent rep for my school. In February 2020, we were shown the possibility of a new school in the neighborhood among options. but that was all shut down a month later due to COVID with no follow-up since. All that money was spent on plans and projections with no transparent outcome. In closing, as caregivers who care about climate change and healthy buildings, we have big dreams of new infrastructure and greening our existing buildings, but we also have small dreams of having our most basic needs met. Needs like roofs that don't leak, cleanliness, ventilation, respectfully working bathrooms, etc. It is also crucial that any modernization process prioritize by need and not by the wealth of the zip code. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kloss, and so appreciate your work and support on this important issue. Good afternoon to the next person. If you could just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Rhea Powell. I'm the parent of 2 children who attend Meredith School here in Philadelphia. Like many other school buildings in the district, the building at Meredith has been plagued with lead paint residue, damaged asbestos, and asthma triggers like mold and dust. And also, like many other schools, Meredith's ventilation system is outdated and has limited our ability to implement best practices for ensuring adequate ventilation during the pandemic. Like ours, schools across the district deal with non-functioning bathrooms, outdated heating systems that make classrooms excessively hot or excessively cold, and a lack of basic room materials. One teacher I know purchased IKEA shower curtains because her classroom did not even have functioning shades. These are unacceptable environments for our students to learn in and unacceptable environments for our school staff to work in. Our school buildings pose health and safety risks for our communities and send a message to students that their education is not valued highly. Although the district has taken steps to mitigate some of the urgent issues and to start to address the decades of deferred maintenance and inadequate funding, these steps are not nearly enough. Addressing urgent issues that present immediate danger should be the floor and not the ceiling. We need a plan for our district that not only addresses these urgent safety issues, but also presents a broad vision for school facilities that meet our student needs and a clear and transparent plan for achieving that vision and modernizing every single school building in the district. We need a plan that anticipates the school needs of the future. Currently, we have to close schools on hot days because many schools have no air conditioning or have air conditioning but can't run the air conditioners without causing brownouts. We need a vision where the school buildings can be a refuge from heat and other extreme weather conditions so that students' learning is not interrupted. Because having high quality, safe, modern facilities is a necessary part of achieving our city's educational goals. Nearly 100 years ago, the crisis of the Great Depression tested this country, and Philadelphia responded by building some of the very school buildings that we still use today. We need to meet our present crisis with action and build a better future. Parents like me are aware that this work will require a serious investment in our schools, and we can learn from other cities that have figured out how to secure funding needed to support school modernization. So I ask that you, as elected leaders, along with district leaders, identify creative solutions to fund the modernization of our schools, demand that your counterparts at the state and federal level support these efforts, and demand that major organizations in our region contribute to the funding needed, including the meds and eds that receive tax benefits that would otherwise support our district. Our schools are the keystones of our communities. They educate, nourish, and care for our children. And especially since the pandemic, we have seen how important our schools are as community hubs, providing food, health services like COVID testing and vaccines, and connecting families to resources. By investing in our school infrastructure with parents and school communities as partners, we are investing in our children's education and our city's future, and our students deserve absolutely nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Powell. Good afternoon, Professor Drake Rodriguez. If you could just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, and welcome to City Council.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I think you sound pretty distant. Is that right? And we hear a little bit of an echo in the background, so I'm not sure if...
Is this better?
Not so much.
No, it's the same. Sorry.
I wonder if it's possible, if is there a way to see if you might re-engage or.
Sure, yeah, I'll try to dial in.
I think it would be best if Professor Drake Rodriguez could log out and then log back in.
And then we can move you right into the next.
Thank you.
Yes, we can go to the next panel for now, if that's all right, Chair.
Yes, I think that's correct.
On the next panel, we have President PFD Jerry Jordan, Dr. Robin Cooper, David Backer, Arthur Steinberg, Dennis Devine, and Lizzie Rothwell.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. I think we will have President Jordan speak first, and then if Professor Drake Rodriguez is able to get on, we will be able to move to her testimony and then move through the other members of the panel. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. President Jerry Jordan, welcome. Thank you so much. If you could just please state your name formally for the record, and then you may proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon. I am Jerry Jordan, president of the more than 13,000 member Philadelphia Federation of Teachers. Thank you, council members Gem and Green, for hosting this important joint hearing and for your leadership in our collective fight for healthy schools. I appreciate the connection and collaboration between both the Committee on Finance and the Committee on Children and Youth. It is critical that moving forward, we enact a multifaceted approach to the ongoing facilities crises that we have collectively spoken out about for so long. In addition to systemic disinvestment and severe underfunding, pervasive and significant failures in district oversight, governance, and management of buildings has resulted in the erosion of public trust and confidence in district leadership and management. Our young people, the majority of whom are Black and brown and experiencing poverty, have had to endure conditions that would never, ever be tolerated in wealthier, whiter school districts. There are several issues I would like to address today. An overview of the problem, concerns with transparency and process, and the need for investment. These three issues are precisely why the PFT founded and continues to lead the Fund Our Facilities Coalition to identify the concerns and outline real, workable solutions to this ongoing emergency. We have secured millions of additional dollars in local and state funding as a result of our collective efforts. Further, we have secured some adjustments in the process, but we're nowhere where we need to be yet. An overview. In our May Scope and Solutions Report, which is included in your attachments, we examine through photos, data, and analysis the various unconscionable conditions that are permitted to exist in our schools each day. Conditions outlined in the report include the following: lead in water and in paint, asbestos, ventilation, roofing issues. The report specifies examples of these concerns and specific deficiencies in addressing them. The report also delves into significant process-based concerns regarding the district's handling of these toxic conditions. I encourage you to look through the report if you have not yet, because it provides a comprehensive look at exactly what we are facing and what must take place to move forward towards equity. Transparency and process concerns. It remains deeply troubling that despite ongoing efforts to engage in a collaborative effort to address the facilities crises, the district continues down a path of obfuscation, mismanagement, and half-truths. I have said many times that the district did not create the facilities crises. but their responses, or lack thereof, have perpetrated problems that could and should have been fixed years ago, and community trust has been shattered. In my testimony in favor of Councilmember Green's oversight bill, I shared a series of letters outlining a host of process-based concerns. Today, I am resharing those letters in your attachments and also adding Dr. Height's most recent response. It's galling to me that in response to over 40 elected union and community leaders, Dr. Height and the district continue to double down on their misguided and frankly unsafe approach to addressing the facility's crises. There are a host of unresolved process-based concerns that continue to call into question the entire management structure of the district's facilities department and codify even further the need for the implementation of Councilmember Green's oversight bill. These deficiencies are clearly outlined in the letters and include, but are not limited to, the following: the district's refusal to provide our Director of Environmental Science with regular access to buildings as he has had for nearly 40 years, and the district's refusal to implement protocols that have either been in practice for years or protocols that have been agreed upon or protocols that we have outlined that are best practices. This negligence has led to very real consequences in our school buildings. In the letters, we highlighted absolute crisis situations that languished for far too long and are emblematic of issues that we are seeing district-wide. To say the response the coalition received is inadequate is an understatement. Funding. Let me make something clear. We believe that, given the influx of federal funding, we are at a critical inflection point in our facilities fight. And that means getting us to the point where our schools are no longer poisoning students and staff. Let me repeat, we have the funding now to get us to this very, very baseline point. But let me also be clear, to get us to the point that our children deserve, and in fact, to which they are constitutionally entitled, we need a massive influx of federal dollars. The Build Back Better bill sets the stage for this influx, but does not provide sufficient funding. The PFT remains steadfastly committed to fighting for federal funding, and we believe that a Green New Deal for public schools is an absolutely essential next step. And the Philadelphia congressional delegation, we commend Congressman Brendan Boyle for his leadership on this initiative, and we are all in to secure its passage. Overarching themes. These three overarching points are important and can help us identify solutions, but let me close by reminding you what this is all about. Human beings. Human beings, young people and their educators and school staff who are day in and day out being subject to devastating conditions that are, in fact, life-threatening. We're talking about students sitting in classrooms with chunks of ceiling falling down. We're talking about staff walking into classrooms with their entire room full of steam and condensation. We're talking about entire classrooms enduring either bitterly cold or blistering hot temperatures. And we're talking about mold, lead, asbestos, and yes, lead poisoning, mesothelioma. It's simply unconscionable, and each and every one of us should be absolutely disgusted that in the year 2021, this profound level of inequity, racism, and injustice is allowed to persist in even one school building. There are solutions. Now we need and demand the political will to make it so. I thank you for holding this hearing, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, President Jordan. We have Donna Cooper joining us, who was formerly on the earlier panel, so we'll invite her and then Dr. Robin Cooper to testify, and then we may have some questions for this group and then proceed with the rest of the panel. Donna, thank you so much for joining us today. If you could just state your name for the record, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Gim. And it sounds like you have a sore throat. I hope you're okay. Good. And also, it's an honor to be here with the head of the Teachers Union, who has made such a strong case for why we need to improve the schools. I just have 3 short comments that I wanted to offer. First of all, I want all the members of council who are gathered for this hearing and my fellow citizens to understand that we are not in this alone. As you know, there was a school funding trial going on in Harrisburg, and the opening of the school funding trial, the Panther Valley superintendent, a school district in Schuylkill County, center of the state, 1,700 children, smaller than some of our high schools, said that to the Republicans' assertion that all they need to do is provide desk chairs, working electricity, and plumbing, that working plumbing would be a dream for him, that they have 75 kindergartners who have 1 toilet to use. And so most of the day is spent orchestrating bathroom break rather than educating their children. Following the superintendent from Panther Valley, the first grade teacher from Greater Johnstown, Mrs. Coble, testified in the state court that she has 1 working sink and 1 working toilet for 125 first grade students. And so the situation that we find ourselves in here in Philadelphia today is symptomatic of the state's failure to fund our schools, and it is a common cause among the low wealth, low spending school districts. And I urge us all to think about how we work with the rural, suburban, and urban school districts just like us to cause the state to come to the table, to put real capital money on the table. And I caution us not to fall for the reopening of PlanCon. PlanCon is the state's typical reimbursement program for school construction. And most of the money, and I should say probably 70% of that money, ends up in the hands of the more well-to-do school districts because it only reimburses a portion of the school construction or maintenance repairs supported with that program. And I should say very few maintenance repairs qualify. So that PlanCon project, PlanCon system, which was run by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, really was a transfer or a subsidy to the districts that have means. And what we need is a fully funded capital program for the districts that have less means, like us, like Panther Valley, like Greater Johnstown. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I listened very carefully to what the president of the Teachers Union had to say about the weaknesses in the school district's construction and capital maintenance offices. And I think that is the root of our problem here. And it would not be a surprise to many people here that I truly believe we need to build a highly professional, well-paid capital and maintenance operation inside the Philadelphia School District. We need look no further than the New Jersey and New York school construction authorities for the creation of separate organizations outside the school district that have become scandal-ridden, corrupt patronage operations. Moreover, to create an independent authority costs money. So for instance, PICA, which is the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Agency, does no construction oversight. It has an $800,000 operating budget before you even get to overseeing construction. We need to be willing to pay for real professionals to come into the school district, to be the head of school construction, to be the head of maintenance, to be the head of repair. They're going to need sticker shock level salaries, but it's the only way we're going to be able to hire the people that can help our great school maintenance staff and the contractors that partner with the school district do the kind of job we need, not the kind of jobs that we saw at Ben Franklin. So I do think that we suffer from a crisis of internal capacity at the school district, and we need to build the will to attract the kind of professionals that would make every school building a proud school building for us to walk in. And the last issue I want to raise is that we have some opportunity. The Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Agency is sunsetting in 2023. The debt that they were created to float will be paid off. The city is collecting about the PICA is getting $460 million in wage taxes that are used to pay off the PICA bond, that have been used to pay off the PICA bonds. But there will be no bonds to pay after 2023. And there are many people who are saying, great, this is a wonderful time to reduce the wage tax. And I would concur. If we're collecting $500 million a year for debt service payments we no longer need to pay, perhaps that's an opportunity. It is also an opportunity to maintain some of that tax rate and dedicate those funds to debt service on a school construction bond, a $2 billion bond, a $3 billion bond, that with the right, through PICA, or through any one of the other authorities that are available to the city. It doesn't really need to be to PICA, because that would require change in state legislation. But it would not require change in state legislation to rededuct part of the wage tax to another authority that already exists to do float some debt so that we can get some substantial projects done. And so we need to think out of the box. We need to think about design, build, operate. We need to think about creative ways to innovate the process of getting school construction done. But at the end of the day, it's going to take competent leadership inside the district, and it's going to take real money. And we have an opportunity with the sunset of PICA to think about carefully how we use the availability of those tax dollars, both compensating citizens by a reduction and also returning to the citizens quality school buildings. Because a city with a low wage tax and crumbling school buildings is a city that will attract no new families and have a weakened future. And I hope there are helpful comments. That's what I really wanted to raise today.
Madam Co-Chair, I have a point of information. Madam
Yes.
Co-Chair, I have a point of information.
The chair recognizes
Just real,
Chair.
very brief. Yes, thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Just very briefly, I just want to thank President Jordan, and I also see Arthur Steinberg here as well. I want to thank Donna Cooper for her comments. And the reason why I've raised this point of information is that so often we think these issues are just City of Philadelphia issues. I just wrapped up my term as president of the Pennsylvania Municipal League, and cities around the Commonwealth are saying all the same things that we're hearing here. But as my co-chair and others have stated, we need a plan. So even if we get additional funding based on the William Penn lawsuit, even if we look at the ideas coming out of PICA that I'm also exploring, as well as others, we don't have a plan. And I chose not to ask questions earlier because I continue to hear the same language over and over again. So that's why it's incumbent upon this committee and others, and the Education Committee, to obviously help direct the school district with a plan. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you for that point of information, Chair Green. We have Robin Cooper, and then we can open up for a few questions, and then we'll continue on with the rest of the panel. President Cooper, if you are on, if you could just please unmute, state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony, and welcome.
Good day. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all council members and guests. My name is Dr. Robin Cooper, and I serve in the honored role as president of Teamsters Local 502, CASA. We represent approximately 800 School District of Philadelphia administrators, inclusive of, but not limited to, principals, assistant principals, facility area managers, climate managers, school police safety supervisors, and safety area managers, food service supervisors, early childhood, amongst a host of other positions. I want to thank you for your efforts in introducing this bill for modernization. Councilwoman Gim, Councilman Green, and other council persons represented here today. I applaud your efforts on this critical issue.
Could everyone please mute, but specifically Ms. Dowdle, if you could just mute your computer, that would be helpful. And if other folks could just check and make sure you're on mute. Thank you so much. President Cooper, please continue.
I applaud your efforts on this critical issue, but I think it is also important to recognize that it is beyond the time to deal with our school facilities. We are in this situation which I believe we can describe as a crisis because we as a school district and as a city allowed our schools to fall into disrepair without adequately addressing remediations necessary to improve upon our school environmental conditions. Further, remediations that were done were completed under a veil of secrecy without stakeholders being considered as vital to the executed plan, and as a result, we find ourselves revisiting some of the same schools with some of the same problems. Our union, in partnership with other unions, parent groups, and community entities, have been working for the past 5 years to call for the school district and the city to address issues of mold, lead paint, and asbestos in our school buildings. For many of these years, the response has only been when environmental hazards are publicly uncovered. We need to change this culture from veiled secrecy to a culture of complete transparency, one that is warm and welcoming to stakeholders, inclusive of parent groups, unions, and business partners. It is past the time to demand the following plan. Number one, it is crucial to develop a comprehensive facilities master plan for our schools, a plan to prioritize the health and safety of our school buildings. We know daily as school administrators that there is no plan presently. Number two, central to developing a master plan is to establish a public process. This process needs to create a public task force in which our school unions and the leaders of our school unions, not where the school district can choose members from, but the leaders of our school unions who were elected to represent all of our members and community stakeholders, we will provide input and environmental recommendations for the master plan. Number three, also key to both a public process and creation of a master facilities plan is the establishment of transparency as the public's right to know. Presently, neither administrators nor parents or teachers have access to environmental health data. Number four, finally, we know these changes will need an increase in funding to finance these school building environmental challenges. Most importantly, which is number five, is the proper allocation of secured funding. Currently, it is unclear to us how incoming federal monies are being spent. There must be a clear and concise plan to ensure financial accountability. One way this can be accomplished is by hiring an independent auditor to monitor district spending to ensure that monies are being spent appropriately with the appropriate accountability measures. We question what the plan is for addressing the most critical environmental health threats in our schools with these funds. Rap group Public Enemy rapped, "It takes a nation of millions to hold us back." In this situation, it took one central office that had held us back. We must take a proactive stand by involving stakeholders in a productive dialogue to resolve these issues once and for all, not whom the district sees fit to include, but authentic leadership groups that will work to ensure that our schools are safe schools for all students. Thank you for your time today to allow me to address this very important issue. We can all agree that all of our schools should be healthy and safe environments for our children, teachers, and school workers. I sincerely thank you for allowing me to present today.
Thank you so much, President Robin Cooper, for your work and your testimony. I want to acknowledge the presence of Councilmember Isaiah Thomas. Councilmember Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that one of the things that's been made clear by this group of panelists, as well as to the parents, Ms. Powell and our other panelist, who was from Coppin School, I think, who was an environmental engineer, actually, Sarah Kloss, is that this question of the district having a sense of public engagement process or embarking on one is not being felt at any level amongst our educators and teachers who are actually in the buildings, amongst our principals who are leading our school buildings, amongst advocates like Donna Cooper who are relentlessly advocating for resources at the state, local, and federal level, but especially at the state level, and by our parents. And so, one of the questions, I think we've laid out a number of recommendations, some of the requests that have been made, certainly by President Robin Cooper and President Jerry Jordan, and by others. But if there is an area where you would like us to start, and I'll throw that question first to President Jerry Jordan and then to Robin Cooper, where would you think that the most urgent thing is for us to combine a real focused attention on for right now that would immediately assist us in moving some of these things forward? I know you've supported this for a really long time, including, tremendous work that you've done on the lead paint advisory committee, for example, and really wanting to see an environmental advisory committee have some teeth. But if you have, one area that you really want to see us focus in on right now, where would you recommend that we focus our attentions? Not sure if I just lost. Go ahead.
I would suggest that it be in the area of transparency. If we don't know what the problem is, if we don't identify the problem and then talk about the solutions necessary to resolve it honestly and give everyone the opportunity to weigh in on how to resolve the problem, we're never, ever going to solve it.
Thank you. President Cooper.
I agree with President Jordan. I think the transparency, that is the biggest issue. There is a lack of transparency, and if we continue to spin the story as opposed to really working together in a collaborative manner, and making sure that it's productive and welcoming dialogue to want to bring stakeholders in. I think then you'll really get a great community engagement. But the spin of what is actually going on, it takes on several different meanings. And so pretty much I know for CASA, we are often left out and brought in at the last minute. And so for us, it would be the transparency.
And I think, and this is speaking a little bit to Councilmember Green, we heard the district testify today. They had an opportunity, to come forward with a dialogue. They have the updated facilities conditions assessment reports. We heard literally nothing from them, and an almost willful determination to not really share, engage in a public process, discuss timelines. Do you have perspectives on how we move forward on all of that, given the district's testimony today?
Madam Co-Chair, I have another quick point of information.
Sure. The chair recognizes Councilmember Green.
Yes, as Dr. Cooper and I think a lot of the witnesses testified, it's not just a lack of transparency, it's a lack of trust. And I think that's a point that, unfortunately, we are currently at with the school district. It's both lack of transparency and lack of trust on a lot of these issues.
I would double down on that. And I think this hearing kind of reinforced from the district's choice to testify with no additional information, no willingness to share on an almost dismissive level about their approach towards public engagement, which again, we believe is critical to this process. We won't get more resources unless we have a dedicated and engaged public. We can do as much as we want on advocating for additional funding, but a district that isn't collaborating with agencies isn't really going to be able to deliver on a master plan that's honestly been sitting around from the first time we got the facilities conditions assessment report years ago. And we are here years later, conceivably at a square one, with very little alignment between where the board is, where the district is, and where the public is. And that should be a seriously disconcerting issue for all of us who are deeply invested in seeing the school system come forward. So, I agree with you on the transparency. I think what we heard today, though, was the problem. And so I'm trying to understand if you have particular advice on, if there's a particular area that we can focus in on. And certainly open it up to Donna Cooper and to anybody else.
Madam Chair, I would also suggest that if we are able to have transparency and identify the problem, that we have to agree on the protocols to follow in order to solve the problem as well. Because we can't decide that we're going to use one, 2 or 3 methods in order to remove mold or asbestos today, and then have a different protocol next week at a different location for doing it. We have to have a consistent set of protocols that we follow.
With you. The chair recognizes Donna Cooper.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. And again, I really empathize with the situation that the members of the PFT and the principals union are in. I do think that the sort of challenge by Councilman Green is so prescient. And I think currently, under the current structure of the facilities office and the way in which maintenance and facilities are structured and interact, we're not going to end up with consistency or a plan. I think I would hope that between now and the period, obviously the screening bill is important and creating a way to get lead out of the schools is important, but that's this big. And the issues that we're talking about are much bigger. And I would hope that we could collectively work to build the will to have a professional office that could work with the teachers union and the principals union in a way that would enable people to engage. And, I feel like we've adopted the poverty mentality inside the school district. And if we understand that to bring in capital staff itself, maybe $500,000 to bring in 2 or 3 leaders of a capital office, and they are professional enough to work with Dr. Cooper and Jerry Jordan and Arthur and them and create that kind of plan. I mean, I feel like we don't have the individuals yet at the school district who can be a partner, a transparent partner. And so I would just say, I think we have to talk to our fellow citizens about elevating our aspirations for what that office does and looks like and attracts. So there are actual people who have this as their life to work to improve our schools. We've had people like that sometimes in the district, and the unions have been able to work with them. But we currently, right now, really need to think differently about these offices, if you get my drift.
Yes, thank you so much, Donna. Are there any questions from members of the committee for this panel? Seeing none, I really want to thank the incredibly hard work of this panel. I want to thank everybody for the tremendous work you've been doing. Just a shout out to President Jerry Jordan and your team for, a 52-page report on, the facilities vision for the school district. Some serious recommendations that were put forward by yourself for the continued work that you've been doing on the Fund Our Facilities Coalition. As you can see from the hearing today, we have a long road ahead. It's clearly worth it, but we are going to need all of us to do this lift because it's enormous. But I think our city's future, not just our school district's future, relies on it. Thank you so much for your testimony. It's deeply appreciated. Will the clerk please call the third panel?
Yes, for this next panel, we have Dr. Akira Drake Rodriguez, David Backer, Arthur Steinberg, Dennis Devine, and Lizzie Rothwell.
Yes. Thank you so much, Professor Draco Rodriguez. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on. And please just state your name for the record and you may proceed with your testimony.
Hi, my name is Akira Drake Rodriguez, and I am a faculty member at the University of Pennsylvania's Weitzman School of Design in the Department of City and Regional Planning. For the last 3 or 4 years, I studied the role of public schools in neighborhoods in Philadelphia, attempting to understand the political and social role these institutions play in our city's many neighborhoods. From researching the role of the Friends of Neighborhood Education to those of our many dedicated educational advocates, including APS, Parents United, the West Philadelphia Coalition for Neighborhood Schools, and others, it's clear that many of the problems and opportunities in the city are intimately linked to the quality and condition of our school facilities. This semester, I, along with my colleague, Dr. Ariel Bierbaum at the University of Maryland College Park, taught parallel courses on the idea of planning public schools as infrastructure. What these premise of these courses were was to understand the context and political economy of planning public school facilities to not only enhance the assets of the local community, but also address that community's needs. These courses were also conceived over the summer when the potential of federal funding via the infrastructure bill created new possibilities for addressing the scale and scope of Philadelphia's facilities needs. Over $5 billion in deferred maintenance and an annual gap of about $200 million in the district's budget that is recommended to maintain the 215 facilities. There are two major takeaways from these courses. One is that we must conceive, design, fund, and maintain schools as social and physical infrastructure in the communities they serve. And two, we must radically reimagine the tools and processes that support this planning endeavor. In my course, students designed infrastructure trading cards and compared the histories, uses, and funding of Philadelphia's many bridges, once considered like local roads and throughways to be local and state responsibilities, to that of its many school facilities. State and federal funding support the maintenance and capital needs of the city's bridges, while school facilities receive virtually nothing from these governmental budgets. Although the 100,000 public K-12 school facilities across the nation serve over 56 million people daily, there is still a $46 billion annual deficit for their maintenance and capital needs. The failure to invest in this public school infrastructure is a failure to invest in the people of this city. And with the overrepresentation of Black, Latinx, and Asian children in these schools, this failure becomes one of the many ways that racism is systematized and institutionalized in our city. The asthma rates of our district's children, combined with the known environmental hazards and triggers in these school facilities, also make this failure a public health crisis. And with COVID-19 and airborne virus becoming endemic, we can no longer continue to ignore the problem of disinvested community infrastructure that are our public school facilities. The students in Dr. Bierbaum's class have proposed a series of tools, strategies, and interventions to engage communities and other local stakeholders, such as the school district's leadership, city council, and the mayor, in a planning process for equitable public school infrastructure. This advocacy planning process combines community data, asset needs and indicators, teacher and parent survey data, and school district maintenance and capital needs to identify and prioritize schools for modernization. To guide the planning process, students propose using an issue identification scorecard to identify what are the most important and achievable issues, who are the stakeholders that have the most influence over the issue, and then these issues are scored using a value system developed by the stakeholders, addressing key administration gaps, increasing transparency and good governance, strengthening oversight, providing more engagement opportunities, things that are not cost prohibitive and easy to understand, and that improve our facility conditions and user outcomes. We realize the issues of public school facilities are large and seemingly unsurmountable. Solving them is not sexy, nor will it yield electoral victories for city leaders. But the health and viability of the overall city depends on taking action in an inclusive, transparent, and sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Rodriguez. And if you could just stay on while we finish out this panel, I know there are a few questions for you. Thank you so much. Could the next witness please introduce themselves, state your name and then you may proceed with your testimony.
Hi, I think that might be me. My name is David Backer. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank
Excellent.
you.
My name is David Backer. I'm a former high school teacher, professor of education policy at Westchester University's College of Education and Social Work, and the parent of a toddler in West Philadelphia. Our zoned elementary school is Comegis School in the Kingsessing area, and as of 2017, Comegis needed $11.3 million of repairs, including an urgent fix of $2 million to its air distribution systems, which analysts found inadequate. To my knowledge, this work has not happened yet. We're still in the pandemic. I'm angry and sad, and I stand with thousands of parents, teachers, and students and other community members impacted by sick school structures in this city, both physical and social, and support the modernization legislation you're considering. I researched transformative school finance policy, specifically the financing of school building maintenance and construction. Here are a few ideas from that work regarding funding school modernization in Philadelphia. School districts rely on grants from taxes and capital from loans for revenue. In Philadelphia, these two routes are fraught. Tax grants come from city and state with minimal help from the federal government. Increasing taxes at any level is never popular, and while recent federal spending packages provide a much-needed breather, they are not sustainable policies, as they have a 4-year shelf life and are doled out by sadistic conservatives at the state level. Thus, districts must look down the lonesome road of loans. And in our special brand of American capitalism, public school construction finance is privatized. Bonds are products for sale in a competitive market whose primary aim is to generate profitable, tax-free investment for ruling class investors. This is a sick system that creates sick schools. The Public Finance Network reports that more than a third of all non-taxable bonds go to educational purposes, and meanwhile, the American Society of Civil Engineers gives the United States a D+ rating for its school building infrastructure. We have to understand that D+ is a grade for our credit allocation system. Public schools need a public credit system. Here's some things that the City Council could do to get money to fix up our schools and work towards that public credit system. 1. Ask the Philadelphia Reserve Bank to create a school building facility that would issue no-cost, long-term loans for public school buildings in the Philadelphia region. Creating such a facility is fully legal within the Fed's mandate and now has precedent in the Municipal Liquidity Facility. This financing plan is independent of many state and federal government restrictions. Last year, organizers with the group Lilac and the Action Center for Race and the Economy led an action to flood Philly Fed President Patrick Harker's email box with this demand. The office was responsive, showing interest, but the meetings never happened. Perhaps a word from council could move the ball forward. 2. Make sure the nascent Public Bank of Philadelphia is able to issue bonds to the school district. 3. Approach surrounding school districts with high property values and propose issuing solidarity bonds with them for our school buildings. Pennsylvania has an inspiring history of school districts coming together across race, class, and regional lines to improve school facilities. I'm thinking specifically of Tredyffrin Easttown's construction of an integrated public high school in 1907 through jointly issued debt. Perhaps our fellow Pennsylvanians in nearby districts would be open to sharing the burden of school modernization with us. Thank you for the invitation to share this testimony, and thank you for your work on this urgent problem.
Thank you so much, Professor Becker. We absolutely appreciate your testimony. I think it's Dennis Tavine, or Arthur Steinberg, will the next witness, Arthur, please introduce yourself and state your name for the record, and then you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. I wasn't sure when my turn was. I am Arthur Steinberg, and I'm the Chief Trustee of the PFT Health and Welfare Fund. Excuse me, losing my voice, catching up to Councilmember Gim. Thank you, Chairperson Green, Chairperson Gim, and distinguished members of this committee for allowing me the opportunity to testify today. As I said before, I am Arthur Steinberg, the Chief Trustee of the PFT Health and Welfare Fund. In addition to providing PFT members and their beneficiaries with collectively bargained benefits like prescription, dental, vision, and long-term disability insurance, the fund employs one of only 2 environmental scientists on staff of the teachers union in the nation, one Jerry Roseman, who you're all familiar with, and as Jerry mentioned before. In the 35 plus years that the PFT has been active in ensuring the safety of our schools' physical plan, much of the work we have engaged in has been akin to playing whack-a-mole. Our union created the PFT Healthy Schools Tracker app to allow educators, paraprofessionals, and community members to identify and report specific problems with building conditions in schools. We are also the founding members of the Fund Our Facilities Coalition, which we're encouraged to count as members, the chairs of both committees represented here, as well as several members of council, state legislature, and community and labor organizations. And we are proud of the progress we have won for Philadelphia's school communities. While it is true that school facility infrastructure is not the single most important element in ensuring equitable, high-quality education and academic opportunity for all, that pride of place belongs to the work and support of school educational and support staff and to parents and families. At least adequate facility conditions, something we do not currently have in many of our buildings, is a fundamental and foundational need on which all else is built. Just relying on the information summary and conclusions provided in the last published study of our school building infrastructure in the Parsons Environment and Infrastructure Group's facility condition assessment, which you've heard about before, which was dated January of 2017, we know that the scale and scope of the deficient and damaged state of our district buildings, as described in the work conducted by Parsons teams in 2015-16, was extreme, with immediate repair, upgrade, and modernization needs of $4.5 billion, almost a third of the cost to rebuild all of our schools, and another $3.2 billion in ongoing modernization and improvement over a 10-year time period moving forward. We also know, based on an analysis of information in the Parsons report, that sustainable capital renewal on annual funding for district schools would have to have been more than $400 million per year just for capital improvements, not including maintenance and operation dollars needed to at least start to reduce and reverse the overall deteriorating conditions of our buildings. But as I assume those on this committee agree, what our children and educators need and what the families of this city deserve is an adequately funded, comprehensive plan set forth by the School District of Philadelphia. And as we've heard before, they do not have one. Whatever else we might say about the current facility condition problems in our public schools, it's clear that the School District of Philadelphia, under the control of the SRC and the current Board of Education, has not developed and still does not have a comprehensive facilities master plan. This is a major problem for many reasons, but importantly, the lack of planning combined with the severely limited transparency, independent ongoing access to buildings for evaluation purposes, and very little substantive public engagements has played a significant role in why we're facing the situation we're now dealing with and has contributed greatly to the lack of trust. There is a critical and urgent need to immediately begin the process of upgrading, modernizing, and renovating our city's public schools if we are to be successful in ensuring all students and staff have safe, healthy, comfortable, and equitable spaces and buildings in which to learn. A comprehensive education facilities master plan process needs to be implemented as soon as possible and requires two separate and interlocking facility-specific components. First, funding for capital improvement and modernization to address sustained long-term planning and work to construct new buildings and to modernize school infrastructure, and dedicated funding for maintenance and operations to address the current conditions of our schools, including dedicated funding for remediation of asbestos, lead, mold, and many other issues detrimental to the health and safety of school students and staff. Consideration of how capital improvement work, including design and construction activities, should be organized, controlled, and implemented by a single entity to ensure the best approach to ensuring efficient, accountable, and high-quality building programs. A school safety and building advisory group should be established and tasked with responsibility for directing and overseeing the development of a master plan to guide the 21st century school building program effort. Direct public engagement, oversight, and input into the planning, priority setting, solution finding, and improvement of school conditions must be ensured. This advisory group should provide with full, open, and comprehensive access to all information and data without restriction or time delays by the district, and should include those direct and near direct stakeholders with experience, expertise, and knowledge about Philadelphia School District facility and environmental hazards and issues. To build additional public trust, open access to all information and underlying data, facility condition, environmental hazard, and related data associated with Done Safe environmental computerized management system, the Parsons Facility Assessment Program, the IEQ dashboard, database. You can see there's a lot here. And all ventilation, asbestos, lead paint, and lead and water data and information should be made immediately available, starting with the School Safety and Building Advisory Group, council members, and city representatives, followed by a widespread public release as soon as possible. The district should immediately be directed to share facility condition-related environmental hazard data and to resume its working in a joint and collaborative manner with our union and all stakeholders on the assessment and inspection of schools for the purpose of evaluating current conditions and to more effectively respond to building occupant concerns and issues. Finally, the district should work with the PFT and other direct and near stakeholders to implement best practices, approaches, and procedures that have been jointly developed, and best practice should be included as a major element of the master planning process and effort. These past 2 years during the COVID-19 pandemic have illuminated so many issues with our schools, especially related to ventilation. What is clearer than ever is that our schools need a centralized, coordinated, and sustained approach to improving physical plant and a facilities master plan is the best way forward for Philadelphia. Again, thank you for permitting me to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Art, for your fantastic testimony. It's really appreciated. Mr. Devine, welcome, and if you could just state your name for the record.
Sure.
Testimony.
Thanks. Hi. My name is Dennis Devine. I'm testifying today as a parent of 2 students at Alexander Adair Elementary and Middle School. That's K-8, and as a founder and still a board member of the Friends of Adair. We raise money to support and build community around this great little public school in our Fishtown neighborhood, and I'm proud of what I've been able to do for Adair. It's great students, it's great teachers in our community, but I'm here today because of what I've been unable to do. I haven't been able to fix the bathrooms. Not a week goes by without some Adair parent asking me or begging me to find out what can be done about the bathrooms. Last week, it was the parent of a 3rd grader at drop-off telling me about the bathroom accident his child had at aftercare because the student held it in throughout the school day. This is the most common story I hear. The kids are terrified of using the bathroom, so they hold it in, causing gastrointestinal pain and distress and accidents, either at school or aftercare. We all know this, but kids can't learn when all they're thinking about is not using the bathroom. Let me take care of a few points first. I don't need bathrooms to be luxury level. I don't believe even a brand new public school bathroom is going to appeal to some students. And what's more, Adair students, like students around the district and around the world, make matters worse. Their vandalism and mischief has long made and is making the condition of the bathroom worse. I readily concede that. There are supervisory challenges in this most private area of the school building that are really hard to address. But Adair's bathrooms are in such a condition that many, possibly most, actually definitely most, of Adair students consider them too disgusting to use. Toilets are often clogged and left that way, stuffed with feces and paper for weeks, with a plastic bag placed on top. Hand towels that should be available for drying hands are missing, toilet paper, some toilet seats are broken. There's a consistent stench that blanches the weaker stomachs out there. Hand soap dispensers routinely reported as empty, broken in the midst of a pandemic. As Adair's coordinator for Comcast Cares Day, I've tried to do my part to address the bathrooms. I can report that no amount of scrubbing or paint is going to do the job, and I have the blisters to prove it. Every year for at least the last 6 years, our principal has requested the Office of Capital Programs fix Adair's bathrooms, but this hasn't happened. Friends of Adair has requested the ability to fundraise for and pay for bathroom overhauls ourselves, but we've been told this is a non-starter due to concerns possibly about the district's contracts with plumber unions. These are highly used bathrooms that don't appear to be updated since the building was completed in 1956, and they've been subject to exceptional wear and tear thanks to generations of students using, and it must be said, misusing them. But 8 years into my volunteering in and around and especially for Adair, I don't feel any closer to resolving a crisis-level issue at the school that I've been hearing about ever since I started volunteering there. The reason why I'm testifying today is because I failed to fix the bathrooms. But the real reason is that a few months ago, I was talking to a fellow parent about her own child's struggles with Adair's bathrooms. and I saw the change in her face. That's when this parent revealed to me that she herself still has nightmares about using Adair's nasty bathrooms about 30 years ago. Will we let another generation grow up and deal with trauma from the biological necessity of using the bathroom during the school day? I hope not. I will work to avoid that, but I need your help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Devine. And, thank you for your tremendous work at Adair. We've been pushing the district on a bathroom standard to the point where the superintendent responded on it. And we have not seen the kind of level of attention to this fundamental human decency and human dignity issue for every child. And just, your focus in on this issue and all of us getting on board is a matter of us simply recognizing that the day-to-day activities in a child's life are part of the conversation. This isn't just about 20 years into the future. It's literally about Friday at 11 a.m. And the need for a child to feel clean and decent and loved. So thank you very much for that. Ms. Rothwell, I think you are our next witness, and if you could just introduce yourself, state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Afternoon. My name is Lizzie Rothwell. I'm an architect, a parent, and a resident of West Philadelphia. My son, who has joined me just a couple minutes ago, is a third grader at Lee Elementary, and my younger child will start kindergarten at Lee next fall. In prior years, my son was enrolled at South Park Elementary, and at both schools, he has found wonderful teachers, a supportive staff, and a warm community of fellow students. I cannot say enough about the incredible people who work and learn in Philadelphia's public schools. But our buildings are a different matter. But rather than catalog more examples of the ongoing horrors of exposed asbestos, flaking lead paint, collapsing roofs, rodent infestations, defunct bathrooms, and rampant mold growth that we've talked about for years, I'm here today to talk specifically about indoor air quality in our school buildings and the urgent need for improved ventilation to safeguard the health of our teachers, staff, students, and their families. Between 2011 and 2016, a CDC NIOSH team took measurements of temperature, humidity, and carbon dioxide in 50 of our buildings. They collected dust samples, carried out mold and moisture assessments, conducted surveys of the health of the teachers who taught in these buildings, and concluded that their health was being adversely affected by the building conditions. Last year, in response to public pressure, the district released air balance tests for most classrooms in the district. The testing showed that many classrooms have no mechanical ventilation at all and rely on opening windows for air exchange. This fall, I've worked with a group of other concerned parents to take measurements of the carbon dioxide concentration in our children's classrooms as a proxy measurement for the air exchange in these rooms. The data we've gathered, which you can access at phila.schoolco2.com, is consistent with the district ventilation reports and the CDC NIOSH study, and it shows that the pace of repairs to these systems is much too slow if it's happening at all. As a society, our COVID response has leaned heavily on individuals to get vaccinated, to wear masks, to miss a week of school quarantining after an exposure, all with the hope that enough buy-in to these personal mitigations will end the pandemic. It's past time for our social institutions, in this case, the School District of Philadelphia, to do their part in limiting the spread of a virulent disease. Right now, we don't know if Philadelphia's COVID rate will continue to burn along at 400 to 500 new cases per day through this winter, or whether we're again facing something much worse if our limited herd immunity, acquired through vaccine or prior infection, can't control spread of the Omicron variant. But unlike vaccinations, an investment in filtered ventilation and updated training for school maintenance staff would help protect us from any new COVID variant. In the short term, we could put a DIY air cleaner, sometimes called a Corsi Rosenthal box, built for approximately $100 using HEPA filters, duct tape, and a box fan in every classroom in the city. But ultimately, we need full building ventilation overhauls. We need the school district to develop a transparent and comprehensive master plan for monitoring air quality, prioritizing repairs, and getting it done everywhere. And we need the city to have a plan to fund it. We will be living with COVID for the foreseeable future, and it takes just one visit to a restaurant where the waitstaff are wearing masks and the patrons are not to see who bears the burden of responsibility for keeping it contained. If we neglect to fix our school buildings yet again, if we do not annually allocate enough funds for the maintenance and operation of these buildings and the price of the long-deferred capital improvements to them, then long after their peers in well-funded districts have safely taken off their masks, we will be asking Philadelphia's kids to bear the individual cost of our collective failure. Thank you, Councilwoman Gim, for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you for not cutting off anyone's mic. And thank you for clarifying the stakes and urgency of this situation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rothwell, and thank you to you and your son for joining. I'm delighted to see him at the 3rd grade at a new school. And, you know, we are doing all this work, certainly for him every day, as well as for the other thousands of kids in our school system. So thank you so much for testifying, and especially about the urgent issue of HVAC and breathability in air. Thank you.
Can he say just one thing he just asked me?
Absolutely.
I'm just going to clarify. One of the bathrooms in the school is the worst.
The worst. Could you be specific?
There are paper towels littered all over the floor. The floor is covered in water. The bathroom, the one stall is dirty. There's only 2, like the stand-up that boys use. Yeah, urinals. And the soap dispenser is ripped off the wall. There's almost never any paper towels.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being on and for saying how important it is to have a decent bathroom. I don't think any of us would tolerate that, you know, in our own homes, and we shouldn't tolerate it in a public school ever. But thank you so much, Ms. Rothwell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I had one question for Professor Drake Rodriguez, if she is still on. Professor Rodriguez, are you still with us?
I am.
Thank you so much for your tremendous work. I know here in Philadelphia, we know you for the work that you've been doing, talking about work on public engagement, particularly within the school system. I wanted to ask if you could speak a little bit to how lessons learned from your research and work on the Green New Deal for schools, which I know you've done nationally, could apply to the challenges and opportunities we have here in Philadelphia as we try to develop a plan to modernize our schools. I also know that your students have developed tools for public engagement on facilities planning, and would just love to hear a little bit more from you about some of that work.
Yeah, I think based on some of the work that I've done, particularly around engagement, but also around like the feasibility and the possibility of what modernizing schools could do for a city like Philadelphia, thinking about the economic opportunity of developing, high school CTE courses around some of these issues, around HVAC, around green retrofits, and really thinking about sustainable, healthy schools, thinking about building out capacity, having I know a few people spoke about having sort of like dedicated facilities, building out that capacity within the school district so that we're not relying on people who also have to pay attention to day-to-day operations and also have to pay attention to educational outcomes, that there are people who are trained in facilities. We need more Jerry Rosemans. We need more people going into schools and advocating for safe and healthy schools, bringing attention to how environmental hazard data is interacting with the lived experiences of those direct stakeholders within the school. So there's lots of different pieces that I think are certainly applicable here that I feel like a lot of people have already echoed around building out capacity, around increasing transparency. Parents shouldn't have to go down to 440 and make a right-to-know request to get the asbestos data from 2 years ago that should have been online. Lots of things, the SCAs that were done a year ago, Those should be available to parents. Parents should be able to make informed decisions. Teachers, students should be able to make informed decisions and shouldn't have to carry around their own CO2 monitors just to feel safe at school. There should be people who are responsive to these issues around bathrooms, around water fountains, around flaking lead paint, around malfunctioning or inefficient HVAC systems. We know we have these large structural comprehensive problems, but we also have a really, really big maintenance issue. And so we need to build out that maintenance capacity and that custodial capacity so that we can preserve the buildings that we do have. Without hiring custodial staff, like Sarah Kloss said, we're not going to make this problem better. We cannot build our way out of this problem. We need to dedicate time, effort, and attention to maintenance, and it needs to be done in the same way as a comprehensive planning process with lots of community engagement, with lots of accessibility, with lots of transparency, and with accountability.
Thank you so much, Professor Rodriguez, and thank you so much for your work. We look forward to continuing to work with you on this. I think as you heard or may have heard earlier, we have quite a ways to go, but the need is tremendous. And I think there's huge amounts of public engagement on this issue. We just need to get an alignment with the school district, the board, and the public, which is, I think, our biggest challenge right now. So thank you so much for taking time to be on here with us.
Thank you.
Will the clerk please, are there any questions from our committee members for this panel? Hearing none, I just want to thank this panel again for your patience. And will the clerk please call the next panel?
Yes, for the next panel, we have Mary Filardo, Samantha Pfeiffer, Carol Kalimnik, Mercedes Nakia White, and Mitch Channon.
Thank you so much, Ms. Filardo. Thank you so much for joining us from Washington, D.C., I think. We appreciate your time and look forward to your testimony. If you could just state your name for the record, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Councilman Jim. I'm Mary Filardo, and I'm Executive Director of the 21st Century School Fund here in Washington, D.C. And been a long-time advocate for seeing great progress in Philadelphia. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. The 21st Century School Fund is a small nonprofit that I started in 1994 to build the public will and the government capacity to modernize the public schools in the District of Columbia, where my 3 children were in school. The 21st Century School Fund does research and advocacy on education infrastructure, so all children, no matter the wealth of their neighborhood or district, can attend modern schools. And I was trying to think about what I could bring to Philadelphia based on my history in DC, and I'm here today to encourage the City Council, the Philadelphia Board of Education, and the School District of Philadelphia administration to be brave on behalf of the children and neighborhoods of this great city. And I wanted to share with you what this means. So bravery means a bold vision for public schools, buildings, and grounds, one that entitles all children and neighborhoods to modern public schools that are educationally inspiring, not just adequate, serve as centers of their communities, and use the latest technologies for sustainability and resilience. Bravery means exposing building problems. People have talked about transparency. You have to be brave to be transparent. Building problems need to be in the light of day to be addressed and to find their rightful priority in the long list of work orders and capital needs. Bravery means developing an educational facility master plan with your stakeholders, not just your consultants. Bravery means sharing and fixing facilities management challenges, managing a portfolio of over 200 mostly antiquated schools with over 115,000 children and millions of square feet of space on hundreds of acres of land in a municipal public school system needs special attention and skill. But Philadelphia is a city full of experienced and talented building professionals working in universities, for major commercial landlords, and in hospitals. The school district needs their input on what the management team needs to manage current day conditions and to transform school facilities into 21st century schools. Bravery means trusting your civic stakeholders to fairly wrestle with funding, management, and building deficiencies, so the city has their support for paying for the capital plan that sets priorities for this generational work that's defined in a master plan. And bravery means dedicating revenue towards a stable capital program for public school facilities. Making schools a fiscal priority means finding the revenue to ensure the city can make progress on the plan. In DC, the initiative to modernize all of DC public schools started in 2000. As of 2021, all of the buildings have been upgraded and nearly 70% of all square footage has been fully modernized or new. The program has not been without problems, but it has been sustained through major changes in governance, administrations, and many election cycles. The modernization program has sustained because there's statutory language that keeps the vision for modern public school infrastructure alive. There's not a fast fix for the accumulated deficiencies in your public school buildings. So this Philadelphia Council and this mayor need to be brave now and put into law the requirements for the modernization of Philadelphia public schools. And I would just say that so many of the things that people have talked about in terms of transparency, in terms of planning, in terms of accountability, in terms of engagement, those things can be in statute. And the reality is that what we can see is the school districts don't do it. They don't volunteer to do those things. They actually have to be required to do them. So I would encourage the council. I think there's an enormous amount that you can do to advance, the goals that you all are so articulate and passionate about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. And it's been such a pleasure from several years ago when we came to see you in DC to discuss this urgent need. As you can see, we are in fits and starts here in Philadelphia.
Making progress.
As of yet, but thank you so much for your testimony. I may have a few questions for you, so if you could just stay on through the rest of the panel. Ms. Pfeiffer, if you are on, if you could just state your name for the record and you may proceed with your testimony.
I believe Ms. Pfeiffer may not be connected at the moment, and we can go forward to the next panelist, which would be Carol Kalimnik.
Good evening or good afternoon, Ms. Kalimnik. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, I can't. Well, good evening. My name's Carol Kalimnik. I'm a retired teacher and a co-founder of the Alliance for Philadelphia Public School. We are a grassroots education advocacy in Philadelphia, and we basically are the watchdogs of the board. So this hearing has been so tremendous because you have basically allowed parents and community members to talk about the realities of what is happening, of conditions in schools. We attend every board meeting, and when we hear the district staff come in and do the reports, somehow this reality is left out and you have a completely different picture of what's going on in the district. So this city council hearing is just critical to allow people to have a chance to talk about the realities of what is really happening. It's essential to provide this place. So you basically put the light, all the speakers here, on the lack of authentic community engagement and transparent, basically present in the district and the board. I have had to totally revamp my testimony just based on listening to people talk. My hope is that City Council will demand the same of the school board, that basically limits the number of speakers and the time allotted. This is such a respectful place where you are not cutting people off mid-sentence and you allow people to express themselves. So I really encourage you as the overseers of the board and the district to basically enforce this policy at the board as well.
Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of a different testimony because I have 3 recommendations for any kind of modernization that should go on in the district. Other school districts routinely have libraries with certified teacher librarians. So these are my 3 recommendations. There should be built-in school libraries with certified teacher librarians, school playgrounds, and green areas, including gardens. Right now, there are 4 certified teacher librarians in the district with over 200 school buildings. These 4 librarians do not work full-time as librarians. A school library staffed with a full-time CTL, a certified teacher librarian, is the heart of a school and should be included in every facilities plan. There's been a steady erosion of school libraries staffed with CTLs. The focus has shifted to providing classroom libraries, particularly in elementary schools. As a retired teacher, I love books and readings, but I am not qualified to be a librarian. CTLs have a multitude of duties besides caring for the collection of materials, including teaching library skills, critical thinking, holding family reading nights, supporting teachers and students with research projects. School libraries provide more than just books, computers, and other technology, databases of accurate information, e-books, plus fun and educational activities. School libraries provide a safe haven for all students to think, create, and grow. According to a growing body of research known as the School Library Impact Studies has consistently shown positive correlations between high-quality library programs and student achievement. Since student achievement is part of the board's goals and guardrails, they really should be looking at insisting that school libraries be part of school budgets, not something that's left up to a principal, whether they get a librarian or a nurse. At almost every board meeting, there's an agenda item concerning a school playground. Every school needs a playground. If equity is a major district goal, then a survey of the condition of every playground should be created and posted. A commitment to equity needs action, not simply verbiage. At one recent board meeting, children and staff testified how unsafe their schoolyard is and how classmates are routinely injured. This has been going on for 10 years. It's unconscionable that this basic need has been ignored. A safe playground enhances emotional development as well as academic achievement. Along with the school playground should be a commitment to green spaces, including gardens. Last Thursday at 4:40, a rally was held by students, parents, and advocates calling for the School District of Philadelphia and elected officials to rebuild public school facilities by creating an open, participating plan for fixing environmental, health, and safety issues. I urge you to actively support this plan. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify, and I look forward to many more hearings where people are actually allowed to speak without being cut off. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Ms. Glinick. And as you know, we share a mutual importance and love for school libraries. It is shocking that the district is down to so few school libraries, especially when our city libraries are not currently in full operation. Children at young ages need a school library. They need a librarian there who is teaching them about media literacy and reminding them about the joy of learning. So I appreciate it. And of course, our commitment to play. Thank you very much for your testimony. I believe Ms. Nakia White, if you are here, if you could please unmute, state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Hi, my name is Mercedes White. I'm a parent of an 8th grader and a 1st grader at 2 district schools, and one of those schools happens to be SLA Science Leadership Academy at Bieber. So we just went through a whole thing with the construction, at that school. And we're still going through that, basically, even though the middle school is moved and the high schoolers are still there. And hopefully my daughter will be able to continue to go to the high school there. So we'll still be fighting this fight if she's still there. And even if not, we still need to be fighting for our schools. But I also was briefly a teacher at a district school that was at the time being run for-profit agency during that time period, which was a horrible period in the district's history. There were times when we didn't have heat, and kids had to walk around with coats on all day. I feel like the district really needs to focus on the utilities within the school. Um, you know, there there's a court case. They're taking the state to court now. Some of the districts are for trying to meet the needs of the schools, and they're saying, oh well, they have the basics of what they need. No, some of our schools have issues with heating. They don't have drinkable water, so if a kid is thirsty, they can't drink from those fountains because the water is not safe and drinkable. So that having water in a school that is drinkable is a basic need. It's a basic human right to have drinkable water. I mean, we're not in a third world country, and even there, they're making strides to make sure that their people have clean drinking water. Um, the other systems within the school, especially, now with COVID and them combining a lot of schools and making elementary schools K-8, or getting rid of a lot of the middle schools and closing them down, you now have multiple schools in one building. You have more crowding within those buildings, and we have the condition of COVID. Um, so we really need to be focused on the ventilation issue and the heating and cooling issue, because we shouldn't have to let kids out of school. You guys sometimes the district will start school early because the kids miss school during winter because of snow days, and then they have them go back in August, and every day in August they're going home because of the heat. The district has made a lot of mistakes in the past that I hope we don't repeat, as far as shutting down schools, closing them, and not replacing them. They shut down my high school, William Penn High School, which had only been built in the 70s. It was a state-of-the-art building, had a swimming pool, a diving pool, a library, rock climbing wall, amongst other great things that were lost. And I believe those things were lost because of gentrification and wanting to appease Temple to, so now that they can put their field where that building and that educational campus once stood. We can't continue to allow these schools to be shut down in gentrifying areas and sold off to pay off the debts. I feel like we're operating in a scarcity mindset, whereas they're saying there's no money. But I feel like there is money because we have money to build and replace prisons. Some of our prisons are better environments than some of our schools are. And if the prisoners advocate for better humane situations for them to live in and for them to thrive in, our students need that same respect. It's literally a matter of life and death. It's, you have teachers who devote their entire careers to our children, to the citizens, by, taking care of our children, making sure our children are safe. And in all over the country, teachers are doing this. There are teachers who've lost their lives in incidents of violence in schools, being gunned down or trying to protect our children. And how they get repaid is, they're in these conditions where they're breathing in, unhealthy air, and they're in these buildings for years. And how they're rewarded is, oh, you can retire, but you're going to retire with mesothelioma. You won't live long after you've been a teacher. So many people leave the teaching field for so many other reasons, and having to go to work in a safe work environment should not, that is a basic right. You should not go to work and not know you're being exposed to things that will kill you. People take these jobs thinking that it's going to pay off for them. They'll get a pension and live out and retire, and they don't make it because they're dying. They're dying sooner than they should be because of these conditions of the schools. I hope that, unlike the district, I feel like a lot of times with our meetings, the reason investments are made in certain schools is because you hear the voices of a few from certain privileged schools, from privileged neighborhoods, and the voices of some parents whose kids aren't in privileged schools or aren't in magnet schools are often not heard. It shouldn't matter if we're cussing and fussing and fighting for the basic, things that our children need. It shouldn't matter if we come to meetings or not. It shouldn't be, the parents at Benjamin Franklin, they didn't, they couldn't make it to meetings. Maybe they're working 9 to 5 all day, but as soon as SLA students go into that building, their parents are up there fighting. So now it's an issue. So you mean to tell me you left those children in that environment all that time, and nobody cared about those students because they were neighborhood kid students, mainly coming from impoverished neighborhoods and impoverished communities. And so it shouldn't matter if we advocate or not. They're always saying you need to advocate. We fight for everything, but I pay taxes, and my taxes are going up. My taxes always go up, and I don't see an improvement in my neighborhood schools. There needs to be a focus on neighborhood schools. We should not be having to send our children. I see, people talk about sending our children out of the neighborhood schools. It messes up our communities. We don't even know some of our neighbors, because a lot of times the schools are those community centers where you get to know people. The children in the neighborhood get to know each other by going to neighborhood schools. So we really need to not just focus on those privileged schools or kids who excel academically or who were able to get into magnet schools, but also focus on the children whose parents can't come to these meetings, who can't go to the district and fight. Just neighborhood schools really need to be a focus, and not just prioritizing those schools that are magnet, and because the students may act a certain way or come from a certain background. But I just please ask that we really prioritize those who can't be here and those who really need it, and we look at it through a lens of equity and not just equality. Making up for all past injustices, and where these schools were already had facilities that were behind and inadequate. But I thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you, Helen. And thank you for supporting us when we were at Bieber, fighting for our children.
Absolutely. And, I'm so sorry for what your children have had to go through. It's one of the reasons why we were really pushing the district. This idea that people knew what was going on was clearly not the case. And the school district definitely didn't know what was going on. Not having working bathrooms at a school building. I think Donna Cooper had mentioned that there was one school that had one working bathroom for 75 kids. There were none working at within Bieber. And the thought that the school district would consider opening it up and subjecting to students, to porta potties throughout the year was really just an example of why we have got to push this district, and the voices of parents and the work that you did, there really made a huge difference. So I want to thank you for your advocacy, your leadership, and your love for children, well beyond Bieber. But, this work is an uphill battle. So thank you for being there through it all. I think, Mr. Channon, if you could just unmute and join us on the panel.
Great. Oh my gosh, it's much darker in here than I realized. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. My name is Mitch Channon. I'm a member of a bunch of organizations here in Philly. Today I'm speaking as a member of Philly Democratic Socialist of America. I'm part of the Education Justice Committee and the Green New Deal Commission there. So this has been an incredible hearing. So many important stories and ideas and concerns have been raised. I'll try not to take too much time. I wanted to speak in support of the call for a comprehensive program to repair and upgrade our schools across the city with planning processes that are transparent and participatory. And I also want to bring forward one other key concern and idea that hasn't really been raised yet. Just a little bit of background in case it's helpful. I attended public schools in the Northeast Philly in the 80s and 90s, and graduated from George Washington High School. My parents worked for decades in Philly public schools. My mom as a secretary, my dad as a teacher and a counselor. Hearing all the discussion about ventilation and HVAC was making me think about all these conversations with my parents, because my mom spent 25 years working in a windowless middle school office that was at least 90 degrees every day year round, and that most often had no working ventilation, despite the best and constant efforts of the building engineer and the custodians. That was not a good environment for her. Like all the stories that have been shared today, I hear from family and friends just countless similar stories about toxic school conditions that are harming people's health, making it hard to learn and leaving people feeling just disrespected and uncared for. And the lack of investment in our buildings is really shameful, as is district managers' failure to address these problems in transparent and accountable ways. I support the demands people have put forward for information sharing, for a transparent and participatory process for creating a facilities master plan to rebuild and repair and upgrade every school, and really appreciate the revenue ideas that that Dave Backer brought forward. All of our schools, should be safe and healthy, with comfortable temperatures, adequate fresh air year round. Our students deserve buildings that are clean, with functioning bathrooms that include all the equipment they need to support their learning and that make them feel welcome and honored. The thing that I want to add is that as we build and renovate schools, I think it's really essential to eliminate the use of fossil fuels to heat and power these buildings. We're facing a climate emergency along with a toxic schools emergency, and I believe that a school modernization program can and should address both. People probably don't need me to say much about this, but the climate crisis is already causing really enormous suffering and death, and people who have the least wealth and power are affected the worst. We just saw one example over the weekend with a record-breaking December tornado outbreak that killed possibly upwards of 100 people. And we see these, almost every day another record is broken. We're on track for much greater suffering in the coming years, and the speed with which we end the use of fossil fuels will play the determining role in how severe the storms, heat waves, droughts, fires, and flooding become. And I think we need the city, the school district, and every other public institution to act with much greater urgency than we've seen. The Philly DSA research team has been learning about campaigns for carbon-free and healthy schools across the country and about options for decarbonizing schools in Philly. I wanted to say that several school boards, including those in major cities like Salt Lake City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Oakland, Fairfax County, Virginia, have set a goal for zero carbon emissions from all of their school buildings by the year 2040, just 18 years from now. And those districts are creating plans and policies to achieve that goal. And I think that Philly should do the same as we try to develop a facilities master plan. The Fairfax County District recently commissioned a thorough study about options for making new and renovated schools fossil-free and net zero energy, and they found that it's affordable. Their research indicated that construction cost would be about 5 to 11% higher relative to other major renovation or new construction projects, but that the additional upfront cost could be recouped through lower energy bills over a period of 10 to 15 years. And so as we work towards a master plan for Philly schools, I think it's really important that the district and all of us together fully explore options for heating and cooling all of these buildings with clean, renewable energy while we pursue all of the other objectives that we've been describing. I'll say it feels awkward for me sometimes as someone who's focusing a lot on climate to even name that in settings like this when we have so many other emergencies. But I don't think that we need to choose between addressing them, and there's really no one else coming to save us. Yes, I think we can and must act with urgency to protect our students and educators' health and to advance their education and to limit the scale of the climate catastrophe at the same time. So
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shannon, and just reminding us again, I think we had a Professor Kara Drake Rodriguez on who was earlier and had authored a Green New Deal for schools, talking about the importance of school infrastructure as a critical part of, it just functions in so many different ways. We're talking about modern buildings that are in every single neighborhood, ideally in walking distance of every single neighborhood in the city of Philadelphia. We're talking about buildings that are anchors for communities, for a city, that can function in many different ways. So we really appreciate your attention to this. I wanted to just bring back Mary Filardo, if she is still available.
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you so much, Mary, for being so patient with us tonight. But just really quickly, I know that you had made very clear to us when I first met you years ago about this importance of a facilities master plan, and that was really a critical part of ensuring that DC public school systems would be able to, I think you've renovated or modernized 70% of your school system over the last several, over the last decade plus. And that some of that of what you had spoken about in your testimony was baked into legislation. I know that DC is a little bit different from Philadelphia. We are a county and a city. DC has greater powers, mostly because you function almost like a state, as well as just a city. But I am interested in some of the standards that you put into the facilities master planning process legislation. I think we've heard comments about the importance of public engagement, about a robust planning process that has to get updated. So I'd be interested in hearing if you might be able to share a few more details about that for our public.
Yeah, in the law, I mean, initially it was actually a congressional law that required the first planning, but it was incorporated into our local statutes, where there had to be a regular facility master plan, had to be done every 3 years. It defined what the major elements of the plan were: the projections, an education plan, program, standards. It also described the need to engage the community, and at one point there was, in the earlier formation, it required a modernization advisory committee. It indicated, that you needed to have the data and information about school buildings. It was, a sort of a best practice menu. But in some ways, probably the most important thing was that you had to keep doing it. And part of not just doing one, but doing it regularly means that when you go to do it 3 years later, you have to, it's a kind of accountability measure where you see what did you do that you had planned to do before, or what hadn't you done, what sort of survived or what didn't. So anyway, it was still a statutory requirement, and the council puts in the money to do it. And so, for example, right now we have a December 22nd is a date for the next educational facility master plan here in the District of Columbia. And as I say, it's a tricky piece. The last one they did looked like an academic report on all the data, but it was no plan. And the planning is hard. It's difficult. You have some very challenging issues in Philadelphia, like we do here in DC, because of the growth of the charters. So what are you going to do about the charters? Are you going to plan for their facilities? Are they going to participate? Are they going to be regulated? I mean, these are hard questions, but they don't go away because you don't ask them. But so I think whatever the council can do to mandate the work, and there are ESSER dollars that they can use towards for that purpose, I think it'll be well worthwhile, because it doesn't, you can't get there by accident. You will only get to a system that supports adequate and inspiring schools with a plan. And you can see that's why you're not there, because there hasn't been a plan to get there.
There has not been a plan. There is not a plan currently. And so I thank you so much, Mary, for sharing your expertise, something you've been doing around the country. You've been incredibly generous with me in Philadelphia, and just really appreciate all your work. Are there any questions from members of the committee for the panel members? Seeing none, I want to thank this panel so much for your time and patience. And will the clerk please read the final panel? And I just again want to thank everybody on this final panel for your tremendous patience and for staying with us. Ms. Gertie, I know that you've been on from the very beginning and just really appreciate your patience through all of this.
For the final panel, we have Caroline Thorne, Eileen Callahan, Barbara Dowdle, and Maritza Garidi.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so glad to welcome you all. And Barbara, I know you've also been on from the very beginning. So thank you. So, I want to invite Ms. Thorne, if you could just unmute and state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Hi, my name is Caroline Thorne, and I'm a parent of a 3rd grader and a 9th grader in district schools. I've been concerned about the state of the public school buildings for about 10 years. So, and other people have documented the many, many types of issues, and I'm not going to duplicate that. I'm going to start by talking about the District Environmental Advisory Council that I've been a member of since the last 3 meetings. And this was an attempt at transparency from the district, but it's seriously hampered by the way that information is siloed. So the environmental employees that speak to this group of parents can only speak about the environmental issues, the lead and the asbestos. They don't have information about ventilation. When we were coming back into buildings, and that was something we were concerned about and asked, it's like, oh, well, that's a different department. I don't know this. I don't have this information to share. The same with like capital programs. That's housed in another like set of people. And so I was really glad when you asked for the informational chart, like the organizational chart, because I think that the people do not talk to each other, or if they do, they certainly don't let on to parents. The district has used this committee to share with parents things like how many football fields worth of asbestos have been removed from buildings. But we don't know how many remain, or what this means in terms of how many schools are still hazardous. There's no sort of like goal line. Even if we're like down here, we don't know like where we're trying to get to. It's the same with the lead reports. They give information about like the lead reports have been done, but sometimes they're not on the website because it's not been updated, or it's because that school doesn't have one yet. It's performance, and it's a continuous set of like band-aids over things. There's no large long-term plan. Finally, they've started to do things like replace a whole floor of asbestos tiles instead of just doing a patch. But this is also problematic because they have to shut down. They have to do it nights and weekends when it's safe to do so. Everything needs to be tented and tested before and after so that the building is safe to go back into. And because it's done at like these premium times, I think we're probably paying contractors like above the odds to do it. And we're still only getting like 1 or 2 rooms done, and and we're still unclear about how many more rooms are left within a school that needs to be done. And so I think that there's a real need to see like what the scope of the problem is. Some of the people that spoke today like have been talking about this for at least 10 years as far as I know. Chair Gim mentioned that buildings that were sold to developers in the early 2000s, like Abigail Vare, these were not raised, these buildings. The developers kept these and gutted the insides and turned them into luxury apartments. So I think that points to a way forward where we can use some of the empty building stock that we have, and so it's actually a good thing that there are some schools that have fewer students, because it means that we have some space to remove students from
buildings, while those buildings are completely redone with no one in the building. Like, we cannot do what happened before, where repairs were done and renovations were done while students were in the building, because it's just not safe. And I was looking at, like, Brian Cutler, who's the state representative, who said, like, oh, you know, everyone has these things, like the district where his kids are, that's what they did, like, to buildings that were younger than ours, and it was done like 10, 20 years ago. They renovated these buildings with no kids in them. We need a clear long-term plan, and we need it where people can see whose school is up next, and that takes into account the kids that need this the fastest, because they have more other environmental risks. And it's great that the person from DC was here and spoke to how it's possible to actually do this. We need parents involved in the planning, and that all voices are represented, not just those who feel their financial input gives them a louder shout. President Wilkinson mentioned something about alternate delivery of school services while this goes on. And I am very wary about this, because that sounds like more Zoom school, which parents do not want. There has to be something in this plan to make sure that kids are not deprived of human connection again while these renovations are being done. And the last thing I want to speak to is that our schools represent, they reflect our housing. So when things happen with the schools, it happens with the neighborhood, and the reverse happens also. Like when developers build a bunch of luxury townhouses on every scrap of space in a neighborhood, you end up where people cannot afford to rent in that neighborhood, and that school ends up gentrified and overcrowded and segregated. And then the reverse happens, like when there's not proper investment in a neighborhood, or the neighborhood high schools that are just given as an afterthought to a lot of people. We need to be intentional about this plan so that it involves city council and how this works with housing and schools and neighborhoods together. And so, yeah, we need an actual plan, not just more hand waving. Thank you for hearing us.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thorne. Will the next witness, thank you so much again for your patience. Will the next witness please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Am I the next witness, Aileen?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Gim, for grounding this joint council in the testimony of parents across the city. My name is Aileen Callahan. I'm a single mother of a second grade child at Richmond Elementary School. I'm also a parent advocate in the RCR Schools Coalition and Reclaim Philadelphia. My son's school, like every other school in Pennsylvania, is underfunded. Not enough money has gone to the building maintenance of Richmond Elementary School. It actually has maintenance repairs of $17 million that it needs, and is translating to the following crises. On November 27th, 2019, my son's kindergarten classroom was evacuated and sealed for incredibly toxic levels of asbestos, his specific classroom. The school was never temporarily closed for cleaning or an inspection, and it took months of parent organizing for every classroom to receive asbestos testing. This negligence will have major health impacts on my son and his classmates and the staff at Richmond Elementary School for years to come. 8 days into the 2021-2022 school year, my son's school had 8 cases of COVID-19 reported from the school. Due to the lack of maintenance at my son's school, COVID-19 spreads very quickly. Our ventilation system is woefully it's in disrepair, which leads to this. I also carry a CO2 monitor with Lizzie Rothwell. She recruited me into that, and the CO2 levels in my son's school are quite high. Parents have, right now, 8% of all
people that attend my son's school have tested positive for COVID-19 since the first day of school. We have 28 cases with a school population of 375. Parents have organized to close the school during this major spike in cases. We made a list of demands for COVID safety practices, and we organized to bring PPE drop-offs to the school. There's nothing more precious to me in this world than my son. As a young single mother, I feel ashamed that the best I can do for my son is take him to a school with COVID-19, lead, mold, asbestos, and mildew in excess. He and all the students and guardians and staff in the Philadelphia School District deserve healthy and safe schools. To respectfully challenge Ms. Wilkerson in the Philadelphia School District, focus cannot be on attracting families to stay. It must be on repairing the buildings. Most public school parents cannot afford to leave. It calls for a certain amount of privilege and access to be in spaces like this, to have the ears of our council people, a privilege that most members of my community do not have. We would not organize so fiercely for our children if we were at risk of leaving. These are our schools for our children to be nourished and not poisoned. We must use the recent and proposed massive federal funding streams to remake our schools while creating thousands of high quality, I'm so sorry, Kelly on the guard, can you close that please, sir? Kelly on the guard, I'm listening to you. Kelly, thank you, sir. While creating thousands of high quality union jobs, improving health outcomes, reducing carbon emissions, and increasing the resilience of school buildings to extreme weather. The health of our community is dependent on modernizing schools, exteriors, plumbing, electrical, heating, ventilation, and cooling systems. Specifically, we must remove all lead, mold, mildew, and asbestos from schools. We must repair and update ventilation systems and repair exterior damages. We must move with urgency to repair the basic systems of our schools over every other update. New lighting and updated technology means nothing in a sick school. We cannot expect the public-private partnerships to hold themselves accountable as a private entity to use while using the money of the public. The school district must create a transparent process to create a work plan, get students, guardians, and staff to buy in on the prioritizations and the timelines, and embrace accountability. We must repair our schools and rebuild our trust intentionally and with earnest, or we run the risk of failing yet another generation of Philadelphians. Thank you so much for listening to the needs of our children today. Thank you for committing to creating healthier schools for the children of Philadelphia.
Thank you so much, Aileen, for parenting and for providing such important testimony tonight. And thank you so much for your patience. Will the next witness please introduce themselves? You may unmute, and then you may proceed with your testimony.
Okay, I think that's me.
Welcome, Barbara.
Helen. Long time. Working hard. Good afternoon. My name is Barbara McDowell-Dowdle. I am a lifelong resident of Germantown, graduate of Edwin H. Fitler Elementary School, 2-year student at Theodore Roosevelt Junior High, graduate of Philadelphia High School for Girls. Spent 36 years teaching English and communications, 10 different buildings, so a good survey, beginning with Roberts Vaux Junior High, and retired from A. Philip Randolph Career Tech High School. Randolph is a converted asbestos factory. Just want to make a note of that. I serve on the executive committee of the PFT retirement chapter as member of the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools, member of my congregation's Ending Racism Committee, editor emerita of the Girls High Alumni News and chair of their Advocacy Committee, and member of POWER, Interfaith Education Justice Team. I'm currently the grandparent of a second grader at Sadie Alexander Elementary School, godparent of a 5th grader at C.W. Henry, and 7th grader at Masterman. Edwin H. Fitler, built in 1898. So today, spanning 3 centuries, was scheduled for demolition in 1970, rescued, repurposed as Academics Plus by Superintendent Michael Marquez, assessed by building engineer when I subbed there 10 years ago, and experienced the heating system problems. His recommendation was it needs to be torn down. Fitler's concrete play yard, devoid of any play equipment, was apparently viewed as ideal by our current superintendent as the perfect site for a full-blown celebratory spring 2021 press conference, complete with every pertinent elected official, except the mayor, over soon-to-be-delivered federal dollars. Our app's protest sign pointing out unrelenting concrete-only yard and absence of librarian, one mid-remarks acknowledgement that we've only painted the concrete. They now have a world map surrounded by boulders for seating. I have not checked this week, but would wager that concrete-only schoolyard remains. The junior high I attended, now Roosevelt Elementary, will be celebrating its 100th birthday next year. Their continuing environmental problems have been well covered in our local news media. I needn't catalog the issues citywide, but would direct your attention to the funding trial going on in Harrisburg right now. Public Interest Law Center and Fund Our Schools PA are sources of information, and to the efforts of Power Interfaith for both documentation of the racist underpinning of public school funding over decades, and prayer vigils organized and carried out by their way overdue Wednesdays. Every modernization plan must provide for a fully resourced, professionally staffed school library, a resource also much more likely to be absent in schools attended by economically challenged youngsters of color. Shamefully true of 215 out of 219 in the school district of Philadelphia. Pennsylvania does require a library with professional staff in prisons. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for decades of work. As you said, it's been a long journey. Continues. Ms. Gurdy, thank you so much for your tremendous patience. If you could unmute, please state your name for the record. And thank you so much with your testimony.
Thank you very much. I have a quick question. This entire meeting, was it also offered in different languages?
I do not believe that it is offered in other languages.
Okay, great. So, good afternoon. My name is Maritza Gurdy, a Philadelphia resident for 31 years, mother of 6, of which 4 are still attending schools in this district. I'm also the Northeast Regional Organizer of the National Parents Union. Sad to say that the conditions in so many of our schools have gone from bad to worse. Things have not changed in decades. How can any of us continue to allow our children, our future caretakers, citizens, taxpayers, and voters to spend the majority of their educational career in buildings that anyone in a more affluent community wouldn't even send their own children into? Would any of you allow your child to remain in a building that is falling apart? What has been happening with the funds that were given to the school district of Philadelphia? Have they been transparent? There are so many families that still do not even know how the ESSER 2 money has been spent. These funds were to be used for infrastructure. Our children, as well as all the educators and adults in these buildings, deserve to be in asbestos-led, mold, and vermin-free buildings.
Yes, they do.
Places that look more like a school and not a prison. Changes need to happen now, not in years to come. And we must end this type of educational genocide experience for our future. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Maritza Guridi, residente de Filadelfia desde hace 31 años, madre de 6, de los cuales 4 todavía asisten a escuelas en este distrito. También soy la organizadora regional noreste del Sindicato Nacional de Padres. Es triste decir que las condiciones en muchas de nuestras escuelas han ido de mal a peor. Las cosas no han cambiado en décadas. ¿Cómo puede alguno de nosotros seguir permitiendo que nuestros hijos, nuestros futuros ciudadanos, cuidadores, contribuyentes y votantes, pasar la mayor parte de su carrera educativa en edificios a los que nadie en comunidades más prósperas ni siquiera enviará a sus propios hijos? ¿Alguno de ustedes permitiría que su hijo permaneciera en un edificio que está cayéndose a pedazos? ¿Qué ha estado sucediendo con los fondos que le dieron el Distrito Escolar de Filadelfia? ¿Han sido transparentes? No. Hay tantas familias que aún no saben cómo se ha gastado el dinero de ESSER 2. Parte de esos fondos eran para mejorías. Nuestros niños, así como todos los educadores y adultos en estos edificios, merecen estar en edificios libres de asbestos, plomo, moho y alimañas. Lugares que parecen más a una escuela que una prisión. El cambio debe ocurrir ahora, no en años. Debemos poner fin a este genocidio educativo para nuestro futuro. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gurdy, and thank you so much for all of your patience and work and for investing in this work nationally as well. Are there any questions for any members of this panel from our committee? Seeing none, I want to thank this panel once again for all of your work, and then we will call, I believe that concludes the formal panel of witnesses, and that we may have public comment as well. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk?
That's correct. I will now call the name of the first public commenter. First, we have Cecilia Figueroa, and I believe we have a translator present here to assist with the testimony.
Oh, and we didn't lose.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see me too?
We just lost your video. I thought I had you on video, but...
Let's see.
Prende tu video. Ahí está.
¿Ahora? Ok, aquí estoy. Buenas noches, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon and good evening.
Mi nombre es Cecilia Figuereo. Acudo a ustedes como madre de 2 estudiantes de Masterman y como representante de la comunidad latina.
Good afternoon. My name is Cecilia Figueroa. I come to you as the mother of 2 Masterman students and as a representative of the Latino community in Philadelphia.
Lamento que mi intervención en esta audiencia se vea marcada por el disgusto y la preocupación que genera el mal estado de la infraestructura escolar en Masterman y en todas las demás escuelas, donde nuestros estudiantes, profesores y el resto de personal pasa parte de su día.
I regret that my intervention in this hearing is marked by the disgust and concern generated by the poor state of the school infrastructure at Masterman, where my daughters, the other students, teachers, and all the personnel who work in it are affected.
Masterman tiene desde lo más mínimo, como es un piso sucio, polvo, escritorio desgastado con plomo, baños en estado de deterioro, hasta lo más grave que son las aulas con asbestos, con plomo y en general una infraestructura que ya no aguanta más. Este es un simple ejemplo de un salón, el Room 206. You see the condition, ven cómo está, ven ese piso, ven ese escritorio, cómo se ve.
Masterman has issues rising from the smallest of which are dirty floors, dust, desks worn with lead, bathrooms in a state of disrepair, to more serious issues such as classrooms filled with asbestos, and in general an infrastructure that no longer is sustainable. Cecilia was showing a picture of a desk that was in complete disarray and is not appropriate for a student in classroom number 206.
Nuestra escuela no está apta para proveer un servicio educativo al nivel que merecen y necesitan nuestros niños.
Our school is not able to provide an educational service at the level that our children deserve and need under such conditions.
Está demostrado, como ya han dicho todo, ¿verdad que sí? Que la infraestructura escolar influye en la salud, el pensamiento y el rendimiento de los estudiantes, que bajo estas condiciones los estudiantes no se sienten estimulados o interesados a aprender o a ir a la escuela. Y los maestros mucho menos se sienten motivados a hacer su trabajo.
It is proven that the school infrastructure influences the health, thinking, and performance of students, and that under such conditions, students do not feel stimulated or interested in learning and going to school. Additionally, the teachers do not feel motivated to do their work.
Nuestros edificios escolares están envejecidos, sin modernizar, carecen de características y elementos fundamentales para la enseñanza digna que merecen nuestros estudiantes.
Our school buildings are aging without any modernization. They lack characteristics and fundamental elements for the dignified education that our children deserve.
Por días, meses, años, hemos estado tratando el tema del edificio de la escuela, el grave problema de seguridad y salud que representan un riesgo constante para nuestros hijos y profesores.
For days, months, years, we have been dealing with the school building, the serious health and safety concerns and problems that present a constant risk to our students and teachers.
Nosotros, como padres y equipo, hemos agotado incontables horas investigando y dando seguimiento a problemas de Masterman y continuamos teniendo las mismas inquietudes sin resolver a pesar de los esfuerzos.
We as parents and a team have spent countless hours investigating and following up on issues at Masterman and continue to have the same unresolved concerns despite our best efforts.
Y como han dicho todos, desafortunadamente nos hemos encontrado con una pared de indiferencia por parte del distrito escolar en respuesta a nuestras sinceras solicitudes a discutir y abordar soluciones viables a esta dificultad.
Unfortunately, we have encountered a wall of indifference from the school district in response to our sincere requests to discuss and address viable solutions to this difficult situation.
Defiendo y soporto este Facility Master Plan, ¿verdad?, que acaban de presentar, pero como madre, como ciudadana votante, les pido y les exijo, distinguidos miembros, que como gobernantes en quienes pusimos un voto de confianza y los elegimos para dirigir nuestra ciudad, consideren con urgencia e importancia la ejecución de un plan inmediato de intervención por parte de ustedes ante el distrito escolar, donde se incluyan todas las partes interesadas y se comprometan a brindar soluciones viables, reales y efectivas a los problemas actuales. No bla, 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 como decimos nosotros los hispanos. Acción, realidad, ya. Estamos presentando soluciones viables, reales y efectivas a los problemas actuales que estamos presentando y que ponen en riesgo latente a todos nuestros estudiantes. Gracias.
I defer and support this facility master plan that you have just presented. But as a mother and as a voting citizen, I ask and demand of your distinguished members who, as representatives in whom we put a vote of confidence and elected to lead our city, to consider the execution with urgency and importance the immediate plan of intervention by the district, where all interested parties are included and are committed to provide viable, real, and effective solutions to the current problems that we're presenting, which put our students in latent danger, not just talk, as us Latinos tend to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Figueroa. Thank you for your testimony and for your commitment.
Muchas gracias, señora Figueroa. Muchas gracias por tu tiempo.
And thank you so much to our interpreter as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Barbara Delau. Please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank the esteemed council members for bringing this important issue to the table and for the ability to give testimony. I would just make one observation, having listened to the earlier admissions testimony, that there is a common theme of problems with process transparency and input from both stakeholders and also experts, which causes great problems. My name is Barbara Delau. This is my 17th year as a public school parent.
I'm the immediate past Home and School President at Masterman and the current Environmental Committee Chair. Importantly, I've spent thousands of hours over 17 years volunteering in my children's school buildings, so I have a deep personal knowledge of those spaces. Since October of 2019, I've worked with other parents at Masterman and implored the district to collaborate with us about serious asbestos issues and other construction-related concerns which impact our school and those who learn and work there. To this day, many issues remain unresolved. I am here today as an advocate, not for one school, but for every school in the district. I strongly support a facilities master planning process, but also simultaneous school-specific planning that includes stakeholder engagement to address current issues. Short-term needs cannot be overlooked as we seek long-term goals. Without question, the issues we have seen at Masterman, a 100-year-old structure, and the frustrations encountered while trying to work with the district have been mirrored at schools across the city. For example, the asbestos problems we discovered in October of 2019 were echoed in a dozen schools, leading to numerous closures from September of that year until the pandemic shuttered classrooms in March of 2020. I have learned several things through this journey. Currently, district leaders see no reason to interact with stakeholders in an honest way. They function without any real oversight, and until they are forced to change course, they will continue to act without engagement or input. They do not see the value of open communication with those who know school spaces, how they are used, and with those who could give valuable input about prioritizing limited resources in their buildings. The lack of transparency and the limited information provided to parents, staff, and other about school conditions and hazards reflect apathy for the thousands of Philadelphians who work and learn in these buildings. Planning, especially comprehensive master planning of the type being talked about today, requires information, public and expert involvement, including the PFT and council and other stakeholders, and accountability. 3 things we currently lack in dealings with the district. The here and now conditions in schools cannot wait for a master plan, which will take significant time. At individual schools, planning and input is required now. School-level planning means addressing environmental concerns with intimate knowledges of how spaces are used and who will be affected by work plans, so that toxins like asbestos and lead can be more safely managed in place. This includes information sharing in real time and working together, and was the first recommendation in the PFT report for our school. An environmental action team could quickly be established at schools across the district with little to no cost, yet the district has refused to even discuss this efficient, forward-thinking suggestion. Best practices, not legal bare minimums, must also be adopted and enforced now to guide all the work done in our schools. Such guidelines were created in collaboration with the PFT and others, but the district has not adopted them, though they would make Philadelphia schools demonstrably safer. Best practices are critical to maintenance and management of serious contaminants like asbestos, lead, mold, and even COVID. We need long-range planning, and we should support and embark on an effort that brings billions of needed improvement dollars to our schools. If successful and well done, we can build for the future, but building new schools and modernizing current ones will take years, even decades, in a district as large as ours. So we must recognize the equally critical need to protect students and staff today. We can't leave people in dangerous and deteriorating schools while planning and waiting to build new ones. We must implement solutions that could dramatically improve school conditions today. School-based teams who work with the district. As unrealistic as it is to think that solutions can happen without the district playing a key role, it's equally unrealistic to think that solutions can happen when the district works in a vacuum, without oversight, meaningful public engagement, not surveys or focus groups, and without a system of checks and balances. While public hearings are an encouraging start to a solution for this debacle, they're not enough. We implore council and the mayor to take immediate action. Establish and enforce oversight, best practices, school-based teams now, together and with long-term planning. Just saying that you support change while waiting days, weeks, and years for changes to occur is not action. In fact, delaying action divides constituents and lawmakers and is exactly how the district continues to win the day while buildings crumble and unsafe conditions persist. I know that I'm just one of thousands of anonymous constituents who are watching what happens as a result of these hearings. I believe, as I think most do, that as our schools go, so do our communities, our neighborhoods, and our city. I will vote for candidates whose actions deem them worthy to hold the highest offices in our city and who prove by their actions that they're willing to fight for all of our children to ensure great schools, equitable and fair education, and who understand and recognize the value of public involvement in the process. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. And I will submit an unabridged version with more details after this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Barbara.
Thank you. We have a couple additional testifiers in public comment that should be being connected over the phone. Just want to check with council support whether we need a minute for them.
Emma should be on the line.
Okay. Next, we have Emma Horst Marks. Please state your name and proceed with your testimony. Hello, my name is Emma Horst Marks, and I'm an advocate with PennPIRG, the Pennsylvania Public Interest Research Group. We are a statewide advocacy organization based here in Philadelphia. I'd like to speak to the issue of lead in school drinking water. It's well proven that lead exposure causes numerous negative health effects, including damage to the nervous system, learning disabilities, and impaired hearing. Lead exposure is unsafe at any level, and yet, based on data reported by the school district, lead contamination in drinking water is still a pervasive issue throughout our school buildings. That's why we have called on the district to allocate approximately $2 to $4 million out of the $1.1 billion in federal ESSER III funding to replace the remaining old water fountains with lead filtering hydration stations in all public schools across the district. The influx of federal funds is an incredible opportunity that we need to take advantage of. Dr. Height shared in the council meeting on November 6th that the district is actually halfway through replacing all of the old water fountains, and they will continue to replace these water fountains with hydration stations. That was certainly encouraging to hear, but it remains unclear to advocates in the city what the district is actually doing and what the plan is moving forward to install the rest of the hydration stations. A coalition of local organizations has shared a detailed plan with Dr. Height and Reggie McNeil to use the ESSER III funding to replace all of the old water fountains, but we haven't received a clear response. And I'm not sure if Mr. McNeil is still on the call, but I'd like to ask directly for the record, I guess, is the district moving forward with this plan that we offered? And if not, what is the plan to install the rest of the hydration stations? So I'd be happy to discuss this further and can share any resources that are needed with council members. Thank you, Chairwoman Gim.
Thank you very much, and we'll be sure to forward that information as it's something that we've been also pursuing. Thank you very much to PennPIRG for keeping that on the radar.
Thank you. Our last registered individual for public comment is Winter Schneider, connecting by phone. When you're ready, please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. May I begin?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Winter Schneider. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak today. I'm a resident of Southwest Philly, a parent to a third grader, and an educator myself. And I feel compelled to speak today because there is no excuse for the conditions that Philly's public school students, teachers, and staff have been enduring and continue to endure What bothers me so much is that the overall health of our schools reflects how the city values and prioritizes its long-term residents. Right now, the systemic devaluation of our city's Black, brown, poor, and working class residents is nowhere more apparent than in our school district. And this devaluation is not only troubling, but deadly for the future of our city. Right now, chronic school underfunding over decades has led to our school communities having to fight for resources and fight for equitable distribution of those resources, all while surviving school conditions that are toxic and unhealthy. While the city prioritizes the development of luxury real estate, Philly's public school communities are left to survive in buildings riddled with mold, asbestos, pests, and lead. These are conditions of structured scarcity, which is structural violence. We need transparent and accessible information about our school buildings, from the school district's operational spending on maintenance to how decisions are made regarding the physical plants of our schools. This is both an issue of scarcity and an issue about how resources are managed in the school district. We need to establish an independent citywide board to oversee spending priorities and to oversee progress on new constructions and that decides best practices for construction and environmental processes. We also need the school district to create a master facilities plan with direct input from school communities to rebuild or repair every school, remediate environmental toxins, and reduce each school's carbon emissions while using union labor and local minority-owned businesses. Lastly, we need you, our city council members, to demand that money that already exists in the city be used to fix our schools. The enforced scarcities that our school communities are expected to thrive in does not exist in a vacuum. In part, chronic underfunding is the direct result of tax abatements that allow wealthy businesses to make a profit off of our city. In particular, I want to urge you to push universities and other wealthy nonprofits to pay pilots, or payments in lieu of taxes, which will help remediate harm they have caused through years of not paying the property taxes that our schools depend on, and which will help build a model of equity into their rampant expansion, which currently creates scarcity and precarity for long-term residents and the loss of affordable housing. As a former professor at Drexel University, it feels especially important to me that we demand our universities reckon with all aspects of their impact in the city, and that we demand that they channel the revenue that they have made off of the city back into the generations that will make its future. There is no way better to do this than through using money from pilots, in addition to other sources, to transform our schools into places that are healthy, equitable, and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all's work.
Thank you. That concludes our registered public comment. Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Clark. I want to thank all of my council colleagues for joining us. I want to acknowledge and thank Councilmember David O, who is on up until 6 o'clock, through the conclusion of the hearing, as he also helped chair the 9 a.m. City Council committee hearing on education. I think that the testimony that we heard today, both from the School District of Philadelphia, but especially from our stakeholders, reinforces and underscores once again the importance of a facilities master plan, the responsibility of the school district to establish one, and the importance of public engagement. Again, the School District of Philadelphia is the only school district in the state of Pennsylvania that cannot raise its own revenues. It does not have taxing authority. And thus, its future relies on the public will, the public embracing of its vision, and especially on public engagement and public trust. We've been very clear that a decade after we closed down 30 public schools, promising that this would right-size the school district, that the true deficit here is around the public trust, more than public dollars, more than resources and money and plans and all of that. If there's a deficit of public trust, public institutions will always struggle. And that the overcoming of public trust doesn't just happen, as you have heard, through empty promises or even perfunctory kinds of public meetings. It happens when there's true engagement, stakeholder, meaningful engagement, on the ground responses to urgent crises, and a continued commitment to seeing this work through. Our commitment to seeing a modern public school system, a school system that children and our city both need and deserve, is one that will last far beyond any of us and will require a commitment greater than the resources we currently have. And that's why it makes it even more compelling that the constant really isn't the politics of this moment. It's not about what lies ahead. It's about engaging the public and bringing the public into a process that's going to be so much bigger than what we currently have right now, because what we need is so much more than we can possibly commit to or come up with in this moment. So I want to thank my co-chair, Councilmember Derek Green, a former public school parent. Both our children graduated in this last year. I've had a child in public schools every single year since 2002, and I've been proud to see this district work and evolve. But it is nowhere near the district it needs to be or is capable of becoming. And for that, we know that our work really lies in staying together as a community, in binding together our parents, our educators, our city, and our educational leaders to really seeing a system move forward. And sometimes we're really going to have to push it to move further and farther and faster than it thought possible. But that is what we need to do. That's our commitment. And I look forward to continuing that dialogue. That being said, I wanted to ask if there are any questions or comments from members of the committee. There being no further questions from members of the committee and no other witnesses here to testify, I just want to also ask if there is anyone else present in this hearing whose name we have failed to call and that wishes to offer testimony on the resolution being considered today. Hearing none, again, I want to thank all the panels and witnesses for their participation today. I want to thank people for their patience for a long hearing and the importance of this commitment. We value your opinions and we will take all of your comments to heart. And most of all, we thank you for investing in this process. This concludes the public hearing of the Committee on Children and Youth and Finance. We will now recess this joint hearing until the call of the chair. Thank you all very much and have a good evening.